The photograph that could destroy everything sat on the judge's desk. But what they didn't know was that the woman in that picture was about to walk through the courtroom doors and tear their lies apart. Welcome to a story about a father fighting for his daughter, a CEO running from her past, and one accidental meeting that changed everything. This is a journey through love, betrayal, and the kind of courage that only emerges when you have everything to lose. Stay until the end to see how it all unfolds. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels across the world. The mountain road twisted through darkness like a promise Ryan Carter wasn't sure he could keep. His hands gripped the steering wheel of his aging Honda Civic with the kind of tension that had become permanent over the past 6 months. The tension of a man carrying too much weight on shoulders that were already buckling. The headlights cut through pine trees that stood like silent sentinels, witnesses to his retreat from a life that had become unbearable. It was 11:30 on a Friday night in late October, and Ryan was running. Not from responsibility, never from that, but toward the only sanctuary he could afford before the storm that would determine the rest of his life. The custody hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday. 5 days. He had 5 days to somehow find the strength to walk into that courtroom and fight people who had more money, more power, and more hatred than he'd ever imagined possible. The GPS chirped its final instruction, and Ryan turned onto an unpaved driveway that climbed steeply through the forest. The cabin rental had been a last-minute booking, something he'd found on a discount website at 2 a.m. during one of the countless nights when sleep felt like a luxury reserved for people whose lives weren't falling apart. The listing promised complete isolation, mountain views, and absolute privacy. Right now, isolation sounded like heaven. The cabin emerged from the darkness, a modest A-frame structure with weathered cedar siding and a wraparound deck that probably offered spectacular views during daylight. Ryan killed the engine and sat in the sudden silence, letting the weight of exhaustion press him into the driver's seat. Through the windshield, he could see lights glowing in the cabin windows. His stomach dropped. The property manager had confirmed the reservation 3 times. This was supposed to be empty. This was supposed to be his escape. Ryan grabbed his duffel bag from the passenger seat and approached the cabin with growing unease. Maybe the manager had left the lights on. Maybe there was a reasonable explanation. Maybe his luck wasn't actually as catastrophically terrible as it had seemed for the past half year. He pushed open the unlocked front door and stepped into warmth. The interior was exactly what the photos had promised. Exposed wooden beams, a stone fireplace with embers still glowing, comfortable furniture arranged around a thick rug. And standing in the open kitchen area, frozen with a wine glass halfway to her lips, was a woman who definitely wasn't supposed to be there. They stared at each other. She was perhaps 30, dressed in expensive athleisure wear that looked incongruous against the rustic backdrop. Dark hair pulled into a messy bun, sharp eyes that assessed him with the same mixture of confusion and alarm that he felt coursing through his own veins. On the kitchen counter behind her sat an open bottle of red wine, a half-eaten sandwich, and a laptop displaying what looked like financial spreadsheets. "Who are you?" they said simultaneously. Ryan recovered first. "I'm Ryan Carter. I rented this cabin for the week. I have a confirmation email and everything." The woman set down her wine glass with deliberate care. "That's impossible. I booked this property 4 days ago. I've been here since Wednesday afternoon." "Wednesday?" Ryan pulled out his phone, fingers moving frantically through his email. "That can't be right. I made my reservation last week. Look, here's the confirmation for Mountain Peak Rentals." She was already reaching for her own phone. "Mountain Peak Rentals. That's who I booked through." They compared confirmation emails in the warm glow of the kitchen lights. Different reservation numbers, different booking dates, same property address. "This is unbelievable," the woman muttered, scrolling through her phone with increasing agitation. "I specifically requested isolation. I paid extra for guaranteed privacy." "Join the club," Ryan said, exhaustion making him sharper than he intended. "I drove 3 hours to get here." "I drove 5 and—" They stood in hostile silence, the absurdity of the situation settling around them like the wood smoke that hung faintly in the air. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling through the pines with a sound like distant ocean waves. The woman spoke first, her voice carefully controlled. "I'm going to call the property management company. It's almost midnight. I'm aware of the time." Ryan watched as she dialed, her posture radiating the kind of authority that came from years of being listened to. The call went straight to voicemail. She left a terse message demanding an immediate callback and explanation. Emergency line, Ryan suggested. Disconnected number. She set her phone down with controlled precision. The regular office hours don't start until Monday morning. Monday? Ryan felt something crack inside his chest. I can't wait until Monday. I need this space. He stopped himself, unwilling to spill his desperation in front of a stranger. But she was studying him with those sharp eyes, and he had the uncomfortable feeling that she saw more than he wanted to reveal. The tremor in his hands, the shadows under his eyes, the way his entire body seemed to vibrate with barely suppressed panic. I need it too, she said quietly. And I was here first. That's not how reservations work. That's exactly how they work. Possession is 9/10 of the law. Ryan laughed, a harsh sound without humor. Don't talk to me about the law. Something flickered across her face, surprise maybe, or recognition. She picked up her wine glass and took a long drink, never breaking eye contact. Look, she said finally, we're both stuck here tonight. The roads down the mountain are dangerous in the dark, and neither of us is in any condition to drive back immediately. The cabin has 2 bedrooms. We can figure this out in the morning when the property company opens. Every instinct told Ryan to refuse. He'd come here for solitude, for space to breathe without anyone watching him break down. The last thing he needed was a stranger witnessing his unraveling. But she was right about the roads, and she was right about neither of them being in condition to drive. He could see it in the tightness around her eyes, the way her shoulders held tension, like armor. Fine, he said. Tonight. But I'm not leaving in the morning. Neither am I. They stared at each other, locked in a standoff that felt ridiculous and necessary in equal measure. I'm Olivia Grant, she said, not offering her hand. Ryan Carter. You already said that. Right. Olivia gestured toward the hallway. There are 2 bedrooms. I took the one on the left. The other one should be made up. Ryan grabbed his duffel bag. Thanks. Don't thank me, I'm not being generous. I'm being practical. He almost smiled despite everything. Noted. The bedroom was small but comfortable, with a queen bed covered in a thick quilt and windows that probably framed the mountain view he couldn't see in the darkness. Ryan dropped his bag on the floor and sat on the edge of the mattress, pressing the heels of his hands against his eyes. 5 days until the hearing. He'd come here to prepare himself, to somehow find the clarity and strength to walk into that courtroom and convince a judge that he deserved to keep his daughter, that he wasn't the irresponsible failure that Margaret and Robert Whitmore's lawyers were painting him to be. Sophie, 6 years old with his same dark hair and her mother's bright smile. His entire world compressed into 3.5 feet of energy, questions, and unconditional love. The thought of losing her made his chest constrict until breathing felt like drowning. His phone buzzed, a text from his attorney, David Chen. Whitmore legal team filed additional motion. Character witnesses scheduled to testify about your unstable lifestyle. We need to talk tomorrow. Don't do anything reckless. Ryan stared at the message until the screen went dark. Unstable lifestyle. That was their language for works 2 jobs, lives in a modest apartment, doesn't have a trust fund or country club membership. Another buzz. Also, they're pushing hard on the argument that Sophie deserves the advantages they can provide. Private schools, international travel, cultural opportunities. Be prepared for that line of attack. Ryan dropped the phone on the nightstand and lay back on the bed, fully clothed. Through the walls, he could hear faint sounds of movement from Olivia's room. Another person running from something. Another stranger carrying weight that was crushing them. He closed his eyes, but sleep felt impossible. Okay. The nightmare came anyway. It was always the same. The courtroom. Margaret Whitmore's perfectly composed face as her lawyer stood and said the words that had haunted Ryan for months. Your Honor, we move for full custody on the grounds that Mr. Carter is fundamentally unfit to provide the stable, secure environment this child deserves. And then Sophie's voice, small and confused. Daddy, where are you going? Ryan woke gasping, disoriented, his heart hammering against his ribs. The room was dark except for the faint glow of moonlight through the curtains. His phone screen showed 2:47 a.m. He sat up slowly, trying to quiet his breathing. The cabin was silent. He needed water, air, anything to shake off the suffocating weight of the dream. The hallway was dark as he padded toward the kitchen in his socks. The living room opened before him, all shadows and dying firelight. And there, sitting on the couch with her knees pulled up to her chest, was Olivia. She turned when she heard him, and even in the dimness he could see the tear tracks on her face. They stared at each other for a long moment. "Nightmare?" Ryan asked quietly. "Something like that." Her voice was rough. "You?" "Yeah." He should have gone back to his room. Should have grabbed his water and retreated to privacy. Instead, he found himself walking to the armchair across from the couch and sinking into it. Olivia watched him, her expression unreadable. "Can't sleep?" "Not well." Ryan rubbed his face. "Turns out running to the mountains doesn't actually solve your problems." "No." A bitter laugh. "It really doesn't." The fire popped softly, sending up a brief shower of sparks. Outside, the wind had picked up, rattling the windows with gusts that spoke of incoming weather. "What are you running from?" Olivia asked. The question was too direct, too intimate for strangers. Ryan should have deflected. Instead, exhaustion and darkness made him honest. "A custody battle. My daughter. Her grandparents are trying to take her from me." Olivia's posture shifted slightly. "Your ex-wife's parents?" "Ex-fiancé. She died 2 years ago. Car accident." The words came out flat, worn smooth by repetition. "We were never married, but I'm on Sophie's birth certificate. I've raised her since she was born. But her grandparents, they have money, influence, and they've decided I'm not good enough." "Why now? Why 2 years after their daughter's death?" Ryan had asked himself the same question 1,000 times. I think they needed time to plan, to build their case, and maybe grief made them desperate. They lost their only child. Now they want to control what's left of her. "Your daughter isn't what's left of her," Olivia said, her voice sharp. "She's a person, not a memorial. Try telling that to their lawyers." Silence settled between them, but it felt different now, less hostile, more like a shared understanding of how badly life could fracture. "What about you?" Ryan asked. "What are you running from?" Olivia was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was careful, measured. "I'm a CEO, was a CEO, of a tech company in San Francisco. We were in the middle of going public when someone on my executive team started leaking confidential information to our competitors. The SEC launched an investigation. Even though I had nothing to do with it, my name was everywhere. Every business publication called me either incompetent or complicit. The board suggested I step back during the investigation." "That's insane. That's business." Olivia pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "I spent 10 years building that company. 70-hour weeks, no personal life, every decision calculated to drive growth and innovation. And one person's betrayal destroyed it all in 3 months. Did they find out who leaked the information?" "Oh, they found out. My CFO, a man I'd mentored for 5 years, a man I trusted completely." Her laugh was hollow. "Turns out he was working with a rival company the entire time. They offered him a position as their CEO if he could tank our IPO." Jesus. "The investigation cleared me last month, completely exonerated, but by then the damage was done. The board voted to move forward with a new CEO, someone with a fresher perspective and untainted reputation. They gave me a severance package that felt like hush money and asked me to sign an NDA. Ryan leaned forward. "Did you?" "Not yet. My lawyers are still reviewing it." Olivia met his eyes. "I haven't told anyone this. Why am I telling you?" "Maybe because we're both strangers who will never see each other again after this week," Ryan said. "Sometimes that makes the truth easier." "Maybe." They sat in the dying firelight, two people who'd been broken by different kinds of betrayal, finding unexpected comfort in the simple act of being heard. "Your daughter," Olivia said after a while. "What's her name?" "Sophie." "Tell me about her." Ryan felt something unknot in his chest. "She's 6, obsessed with dinosaurs, not the cute cartoon ones, the actual prehistoric creatures. She can name every period of the Mesozoic era and will absolutely correct you if you call a pterodactyl a dinosaur, because technically it's a flying reptile. Olivia smiled for the first time since he'd arrived. Sounds formidable. She is. She's brilliant and funny and so much braver than I'll ever be. Ryan's voice cracked. And the thought of losing her. He couldn't finish. The words dissolved into something raw and painful that he couldn't articulate. You won't, Olivia said firmly. The courts favor biological parents, especially fathers who've been actively involved since birth. You don't know the Whitmores. They have resources I can't compete with. Their lawyers are painting me as unstable, financially insecure, unable to provide the advantages they can offer. What advantages? A big house? Private schools? Olivia's voice hardened. Those aren't advantages. Those are luxuries. There's a difference. Try explaining that to a judge who's looking at my tax returns versus their portfolio. A good lawyer would make that argument. I have a good lawyer. I have a great lawyer, actually, but even he's worried. Ryan stood abruptly, suddenly unable to sit still. He walked to the windows, looking out at darkness. The hearing is Thursday, 5 days from now. I came up here hoping to find some kind of clarity, some strength. Instead, I'm having a breakdown in front of a stranger at 3 a.m. It's not a breakdown, Olivia said quietly. It's honesty. Ryan turned to look at her. What's the difference? A breakdown is falling apart. Honesty is just admitting that you're barely holding it together. There's strength in that admission. I don't feel strong. Nobody does. That's the secret nobody tells you. Olivia stood, the blanket falling from her shoulders. The people who look strongest are usually just better at hiding the cracks. She walked to the kitchen and returned with 2 glasses of water. She handed one to Ryan. To honesty, she said, raising her glass slightly. Ryan clinked his glass against hers. To surviving until morning. They drank in silence, and somehow the weight felt lighter. Not gone. Never gone. But bearable, in a way it hadn't been in months. I should try to sleep, Ryan said finally. Yeah, me too. But neither of them moved. Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall, tapping against the windows like fingers seeking entry. Ryan? Olivia's voice was soft. Yeah? You're going to win. On Thursday. You're going to walk into that courtroom and fight for your daughter, and you're going to win. You can't know that. No, she agreed, but I can believe it anyway. Morning came with weak sunlight filtering through clouds, heavy with the promise of more rain. Ryan woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of someone moving in the kitchen. For a confused moment, he thought he was home, that Sophie would come bursting through the door any second, demanding pancakes shaped like stegosauruses. Then reality crashed back. He found Olivia at the kitchen counter, laptop open, phone pressed to her ear. She'd changed into fresh clothes, expensive designer casual that somehow looked both effortless and perfectly composed. Her hair was still damp from a shower. Yes, I understand it's Saturday, she was saying, her voice carrying the crisp authority of someone used to getting answers. But your company double-booked a property, and I need to speak with a manager immediately. Ryan poured himself coffee and stayed quiet, watching her work. I don't care if he's at his daughter's soccer game. I need him to call me back within the hour, or I'm posting reviews on every rental platform detailing this exact conversation. She paused. Yes, that's the correct email, thank you. She hung up and looked at Ryan. The assistant manager claims it's a system error. They're trying to track down the owner. You think we'll actually get answers? I think we'll get excuses. Olivia closed her laptop. But I'm not leaving, and I assume you're not either, so we might as well figure out how to coexist. Coexist? Ryan took a long drink of coffee. That's one way to put it. You have a better suggestion? Before Ryan could answer, his phone rang. David Chen's name flashed on the screen. I should take this, Ryan said, walking toward the deck. The rain had stopped, leaving everything dripping and fresh. The mountain view was spectacular, peaks rising in layers of gray and green, disappearing into low clouds. Ryan answered the call. David. Please tell me you're somewhere quiet and remote like I suggested, his attorney said without preamble. I'm at a cabin in the mountains outside Seattle. Good, because I need you calm for what I'm about to tell you. Ryan's hand tightened on the phone. What happened? The Whitmores filed another motion. They're requesting a psychological evaluation. What? It's a standard tactic when they're building a case for unfitness. They'll argue that the stress of single parenthood, the trauma of losing Sophie's mother, your financial struggles, they'll paint it all as evidence that you need professional assessment. I'm not unstable, David. I know that, but we have to take this seriously. If you refuse the evaluation, they'll use that against you. If you agree, they'll try to find any small indication of anxiety or depression and blow it out of proportion. Ryan pressed his free hand against the railing, wood rough and damp under his palm. So I'm damned either way. Not damned, just in a tight spot. David's voice softened. Look, we knew this would get ugly. The Whitmores have unlimited resources and a grudge that borders on obsession. But you have something they don't. What's that? You have Sophie's love. You have 2 years of being her primary caregiver. You have a history of putting her needs first, even when it cost you opportunities. Those things matter, Ryan. Judges aren't stupid. They can see the difference between someone who wants a child and someone who loves one. Ryan wanted to believe that, desperately wanted to believe that love would be enough. What do we do about the evaluation? He asked. We agree, but on our terms. We select the psychologist from an approved list and we prepare you properly. I'll email you some materials to review. Just stay calm this weekend. Rest. Don't give them any ammunition. After the call ended, Ryan stood on the deck, breathing in mountain air and trying to hold himself together. Behind him, the glass door slid open. Everything okay? Olivia asked. Not really. Ryan turned to face her. They want me to undergo a psychological evaluation. My lawyer says it's a trap no matter what I choose. Olivia leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. What would the evaluation assess? My mental fitness to be a parent, whether I'm stable enough to handle the responsibility. The words tasted like ash. They're building a narrative that I'm broken, damaged by grief and stress. Are you? The directness of the question caught him off guard. What? Are you broken? Olivia asked. Not damaged. Everyone carries damage. But broken. Unable to function. Unable to care for your daughter. Ryan thought about the past 2 years. The morning routines he'd maintained even on the days when getting out of bed felt impossible. The parent-teacher conferences, doctor's appointments, birthday parties. The nights reading stories until Sophie fell asleep against his shoulder. The lunchboxes packed with dinosaur-shaped sandwiches. The tears wiped away. The scraped knees bandaged. The "I love you, Daddy," whispered in the darkness. No, he said firmly. I'm not broken. Then don't let them make you question that. Olivia stepped onto the deck beside him. A psychological evaluation will show what you already know, that you're a functioning adult managing extraordinary stress with grace. Let them order it. Let them waste their money. The results won't give them what they want. You sound confident. I spent 10 years reading people in boardrooms. I know when someone is actually unstable versus when they're just dealing with legitimate hardship. You're the latter. They stood side by side, looking out at the mountains. The clouds were beginning to break, allowing shafts of sunlight to pierce through and illuminate patches of forest in brilliant green. Thank you, Ryan said quietly. For what? For listening. For not treating me like I'm already defeated. Olivia was quiet for a moment. Someone did that for me once, when my company was imploding and everyone else was running for the exits. My assistant, 23 years old, fresh out of college, she stayed late one night and told me that smart people don't abandon ship just because there's a storm. She said the real test of leadership was how you handled crisis, not success. Did she stay with the company? No, I laid her off 3 weeks later when we had to make cuts. Olivia's voice was flat. She deserved better. They all did. That wasn't your fault, wasn't it? I hired the CFO who betrayed us. I missed the signs. I was so focused on growth that I didn't see the rot underneath. Ryan turned to look at her. You're not responsible for someone else's choice to commit fraud. Tell that to the 200 employees who lost their jobs. They stood in heavy silence, both carrying guilt that wouldn't dissolve no matter how many people told them it wasn't theirs to carry. All right, Olivia said abruptly. Here's what we're going to do. We're stuck here together whether we like it or not. The property management company is useless. So we split the space, maintain boundaries, and try not to make each other's situations worse. Agreed? Agreed. Good. I'll take the bedroom on the left. You take the right. We share the common areas on a first-come, first-served basis. If one of us needs privacy, we respect that. Sounds reasonable. And one more thing, Olivia added. If either of us is having a nightmare or a breakdown at 3 in the morning, we don't pretend we didn't see it, but we don't push either. We just exist, okay? Ryan nodded. Okay. It was the strangest treaty he'd ever negotiated, but somehow it felt right. The rest of Saturday passed in careful choreography. Olivia worked on her laptop, taking calls that sounded like they involved lawyers and severance packages. Ryan went for a long hike, trying to clear his head and prepare for the evaluation David would arrange. They crossed paths in the kitchen at lunch, making sandwiches in companionable silence. By evening, the rain had returned in earnest. Ryan built a fire while Olivia cooked pasta. Apparently she'd brought groceries when she'd initially arrived, and she offered to share rather than let things go to waste. They ate dinner on opposite ends of the couch, watching the fire, not talking about the things that were crushing them. "Can I ask you something?" Ryan said eventually. "Depends on the question." "Last night you said you hadn't signed the NDA yet. Why not?" Olivia set down her wine glass. "Because signing it would mean accepting their version of events. It would mean agreeing to stay silent about what really happened, and I'm not ready to do that. Even if it costs you. Especially if it costs me." She looked at him directly. "I spent 10 years building something I believed in. I'm not going to let it end with me signing away my right to tell the truth. The truth doesn't always win." "No," Olivia agreed, "but silence always loses." Ryan thought about that. About the Whitmore's lawyers who wanted him to accept that he was less than, that his love wasn't enough, that Sophie would be better off in a mansion with people who saw her as a possession rather than in a small apartment with a father who saw her as the entire world. "I'm not signing anything either," he said. "Whatever happens Thursday, I'm fighting." Olivia raised her glass. "To fighting." They drank to that promise, watching the fire burn low while the rain drummed against the roof and the mountain held them in its isolated embrace. Neither of them knew it yet, but this cabin, this accidental collision of two broken people, would become the thing that saved them both. But first they'd have to survive the storm that was coming, and it was going to be worse than either of them imagined. Sunday morning arrived with silence so complete it felt like the world had stopped breathing. Ryan woke to pale light filtering through the curtains and the realization that he'd slept through the entire night without nightmares. It was the first time in months. He found Olivia already awake, sitting on the deck with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders and a mug of coffee steaming in the cold morning air. The mountains stretched before them, peaks touched with gold as the sun broke over the ridgeline. "Morning," Ryan said, stepping outside with his own coffee. "Morning." Olivia didn't look away from the view. "I was thinking about going for a hike. There's a trail marked on the cabin map that leads to a viewpoint about 2 miles up." "I could show you," Ryan offered. "I did part of it yesterday. The terrain gets tricky in a few spots." She glanced at him, something unreadable in her expression. "You don't have to." "I know, but I want to." He paused. "Unless you'd rather go alone." "No." The word came quickly, almost surprising her. "No. Company would be good." They set out an hour later after breakfast and hasty preparations. The trail wound upward through dense forest, the path still damp from rain but manageable. Ryan walked slightly ahead, pointing out roots and rocks that could trip an unwary hiker. "You do this often?" Olivia asked, her breathing steady despite the incline. "Used to, before Sophie was born. My fiancée, Amanda, she loved hiking. We'd spend entire weekends in the mountains. The memory didn't hurt as much as it once had. After she died, I couldn't do it anymore. Everything reminded me of her." "What changed?" Ryan stepped over a fallen log and offered his hand to help Olivia across. She took it briefly, her grip firm and warm. "Sophie got old enough to ask questions," he said, "about her mother, about what Amanda loved. I realized I could either avoid those memories or share them with her. So we started going on small hikes. Nothing too intense, but enough to show her the world her mother loved." "That's beautiful," Olivia said quietly. "It's survival. I didn't want Sophie to grow up thinking her mother was just photographs and stories. I wanted her to feel connected to something real. They climbed in silence for a while, the forest thick and green around them. Birds called from the canopy, and somewhere in the distance, water rushed over rocks. "What about you?" Ryan asked. "What did you do before the company consumed your life?" Olivia laughed, a sound without bitterness for once. "I barely remember. I started the company when I was 24, right out of business school. For 6 years, it was just me and 2 engineers working out of a garage, trying to build something that mattered." "What did the company do?" "Data security. We developed encryption protocols for small businesses that couldn't afford enterprise-level protection. The idea was to democratize privacy, make it accessible to everyone, not just corporations with massive budgets." Ryan glanced back at her. "That actually sounds important." It was. We protected client information for thousands of small businesses. Medical offices, legal practices, independent contractors. People trusted us with their most sensitive data. Her voice hardened. "Which makes what my CFO did even more unforgivable. He didn't just betray me. He put all those people at risk." "Were they compromised?" "No, thank goodness. We caught it before any actual data was exposed. But the investigation, the publicity, it destroyed our credibility anyway. Most of our clients moved to competitors. The ones who stayed did it out of loyalty, not confidence." The trail steepened, and they both focused on the climb. Ryan's legs burned with the effort, but it felt good, clean, physical exertion that had nothing to do with legal battles or impossible choices. They reached the viewpoint 40 minutes later, breathless and sweating despite the cool air. The vista opened before them like something from a dream, layer upon layer of mountains stretching to the horizon, valleys filled with morning mist, the whole world rendered in shades of green and blue and gold. "Oh," Olivia breathed. They stood side by side on the rocky outcrop, wind tugging at their clothes and hair. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence wasn't awkward or forced. It was the kind of silence that came from standing in front of something too vast for words. "I forget sometimes," Olivia said finally, "that the world is bigger than boardrooms and legal documents." "I forget that it's bigger than courtrooms and custody hearings," Ryan replied. She turned to look at him, really look at him, and Ryan felt something shift. Not attraction, or not just that, but recognition. The understanding that came from meeting someone who carried similar weight. "Tell me about Thursday," Olivia said. "Walk me through what happens." Ryan sat down on a flat boulder, and after a moment Olivia joined him. The stone was cold through his jeans, but the sun was warming his face. "We arrive at the courthouse at 9, he began. "There's a preliminary session where the judge reviews all the filed motions and evidence. Then the Whitmore's lawyers present their case, why they believe I'm unfit, why Sophie would be better off with them. They'll have character witnesses, probably Sophie's pediatrician, some teachers, maybe neighbors who can testify about seeing me stressed or struggling. Are those witnesses lying? No, that's the problem. I am stressed. I do struggle sometimes. Single parenthood is hard, and I'm doing it on a teacher's salary while working weekends as a security guard to make ends meet. They'll take those true facts and twist them into a narrative of instability. And your lawyer, what's his strategy? David will argue that being a working parent doesn't equal being unfit. He'll present evidence of my involvement in Sophie's life, school records showing I never miss a conference, medical records showing I'm attentive to her health, testimony from Sophie's therapist about her emotional well-being. She has a therapist? Since Amanda died, I wanted to make sure she had someone to talk to about her grief, someone neutral who could help her process losing her mother. Ryan picked up a small stone and turned it over in his fingers. The Whitmores will probably use that against me too. Argue that if Sophie needs therapy, it's evidence of trauma from living with me. That's twisted logic. That's family court. Ryan tossed the stone over the edge of the outcrop, watching it disappear into the trees below. The judge will also review financial records. Mine look pathetic compared to theirs. They have a trust fund set up for Sophie's education, a house with a room already decorated for her, connections to the best private schools in the state. What do you have? A 2-bedroom apartment in a decent school district, a reliable car that's paid off, a savings account that's mostly empty because childcare costs are insane. He looked at Olivia. I have love. I have 2 years of being the only parent she's known since Amanda died. But I don't know if that's enough. Olivia was quiet for a long moment, her eyes on the distant mountains. "My father died when I was 8, she said finally. "Heart attack, sudden and devastating. My mother had 2 choices: move in with my wealthy grandparents who wanted to send me to boarding school, or struggle as a single parent on a nurse's salary. What did she choose? The struggle. She worked double shifts. We lived in a tiny apartment. I wore hand-me-down clothes and ate mac and cheese for dinner, more nights than I can count. My grandparents told her she was being selfish, that she was depriving me of opportunities. But she kept you. She kept me. And you know what I remember from that time? Not the small apartment or the secondhand clothes. I remember her reading to me every night, no matter how exhausted she was. I remember her showing up to every school event, even if she had to switch shifts to make it happen. I remember feeling loved, chosen, worth fighting for." Ryan felt something tight in his chest begin to loosen. "Your grandparents," he said. "What happened with them?" "Eventually, they accepted my mother's decision. By the time I was in high school, we'd built a relationship with them. They helped pay for college, but they never forgot that my mother put my emotional needs above their financial advantages. And years later, when my mother got sick, they were the first ones at the hospital, because they'd seen what really mattered." "You think the Whitmores will come around?" "Honestly, I don't know. Some people can't see past their own grief." Olivia stood, brushing off her jeans. "But I know that 20 years from now, Sophie is going to remember who fought for her, who showed up, who put her first even when it was hard." They started the hike back down, the descent easier but requiring more careful attention to footing. Ryan felt lighter somehow, as if sharing the burden had made it less overwhelming. "Can I ask you something?" Olivia said as they navigated a particularly steep section. "Sure." "Why did Amanda's parents wait 2 years? You said she died 2 years ago. Why file for custody now?" It was a question Ryan had asked himself countless times. "I think they needed time to grieve, to process losing their daughter. And maybe they thought the pain would fade, but it didn't. It got worse." He paused to help Olivia over a tricky spot. "About 6 months ago, I started dating someone. Nothing serious, just a few dinners. But someone saw us and told the Whitmores. I think that's what triggered this. They couldn't handle you moving on. They couldn't handle the idea of someone else being part of Sophie's life, someone who wasn't their daughter." Ryan felt the familiar guilt rise up. "I broke it off immediately, but by then the lawyers were already involved." "You shouldn't have had to do that." "Maybe not. But Sophie comes first. If dating meant risking custody, it wasn't worth it." They reached the cabin just after noon, hungry and tired and somehow more settled than when they'd left. Olivia made sandwiches while Ryan built up the fire that had died overnight. "I have to make some calls this afternoon," Olivia said, handing him a plate. "Lawyer stuff. But after that, want to watch a movie or something? I saw a collection of DVDs under the TV." "Yeah," Ryan said, surprised by how much he wanted that. "That sounds good." The afternoon passed in a strange domestic rhythm that felt both foreign and natural. Olivia took her calls on the deck, her voice rising and falling as she negotiated terms Ryan could only guess at. He used the time to review the materials David had sent about the psychological evaluation. Practice questions, tips for staying calm, warnings about manipulative tactics. By evening, they were both exhausted in different ways. They settled on opposite ends of the couch with an old comedy neither had seen, eating leftover pasta and drinking the wine Olivia had brought. Halfway through the movie, Ryan's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Mr. Carter, this is Margaret Whitmore. We need to talk about Thursday. Please call me." His entire body went rigid. "What is it?" Olivia asked, noticing his expression. "Sophie's grandmother. She wants to talk." "That's unusual, isn't it? Going around the lawyers?" "Very." Ryan stared at the message. "David warned me about this. They sometimes try to negotiate directly, get you to say something they can use against you. So don't call her." "But what if it's important? What if something happened to Sophie?" Olivia took the phone from his hand and read the message. "It doesn't say it's an emergency. It says she wants to talk about Thursday. That's strategy, not crisis." "I should at least find out what she wants." "Ryan, listen to me." Olivia's voice was firm. "I've negotiated with people like this. Powerful people who are used to getting what they want. She's reaching out directly because her lawyers told her to. They're testing you, seeing if you'll engage without counsel present. You don't know that. Actually, I do. It's called the personal appeal tactic. Make it seem like it's just two reasonable people trying to avoid conflict, get you comfortable, then twist whatever you say into evidence of instability or poor judgment. Ryan wanted to argue, but her logic was sound. He forwarded the message to David with a note. Should I respond? The reply came within minutes. Absolutely not. Any communication goes through me. This is exactly what we discussed. Ryan showed Olivia the response. She nodded, satisfied. Trust your lawyer. He knows what he's doing. They tried to return to the movie, but Ryan couldn't focus. The text had shattered his temporary peace, reminding him that in 3 days he'd be fighting for his daughter's future. Hey, Olivia said softly. Look at me. He did. You're going to be okay. Thursday is going to be brutal and terrifying, but you're going to survive it, and Sophie is going to come home with you. You can't promise that. No, but I can believe it, and sometimes belief is enough to get you through. Ryan wanted to believe her, wanted to trust that love and consistency would outweigh money and influence. But fear was a louder voice. His phone buzzed again. Another text from Margaret. I know your lawyer advised you not to respond, but please consider this. We're not monsters. We loved Amanda. We love Sophie. This doesn't have to be a war. Don't read it, Olivia said, but Ryan already had. She's right, though. They did love Amanda, and they do love Sophie in their own way. Love that comes with conditions isn't love, it's control. Olivia took his phone and set it face down on the coffee table. My CFO told me he loved our company too, right before he betrayed it for a better offer. People justify terrible actions with the language of love all the time. This is different. Is it? They're trying to take your daughter because they believe their way is better. That's not love, that's arrogance. Ryan stood abruptly, suddenly unable to sit still. He paced to the windows, looking out at darkness and his own reflection. What if they're right? The words came out broken. What if Sophie would be better off with them? What if I'm being selfish, keeping her in my small apartment when she could have everything they're offering? Stop. Olivia was beside him now, her hand on his arm. Listen to yourself. You're not being selfish. You're being her father. There's a difference. How do you know? Because selfish people don't question whether they're being selfish. They just take what they want and justify it later. She turned him to face her. You're questioning everything because you want what's best for Sophie. They're fighting you because they want what makes them feel better. See the difference? Ryan felt something crack inside him, all the pressure and fear and doubt rushing out in a wave he couldn't control. His breath hitched, and then he was crying, really crying, for the first time since the custody battle began. Olivia didn't say anything. She just stood there, a steady presence while he fell apart. When he finally regained control, embarrassment flooded in. Sorry, he managed. I shouldn't. Don't apologize. You're carrying an impossible weight. You're allowed to break. I can't afford to break. Not before Thursday. Breaking now means you won't break then. Olivia guided him back to the couch. Trust me, I've learned this the hard way. You can't be strong for the moments that matter if you never let yourself be weak in the moments that don't. They sat in silence while Ryan tried to piece himself back together. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the scent of pine and coming rain. Tell me about Amanda, Olivia said eventually. If you want to. Ryan wasn't sure he did, but talking felt better than the alternative. She was a teacher, 3rd grade. We met at a charity event for the school district. I was volunteering as security. She was there representing her classroom. We started talking about her students, and I could see how much she loved them, how much she believed in them. What was she like? Funny, optimistic in a way that wasn't naive. She knew the world was hard, but she chose to focus on the good anyway. She wanted to make things better, even if it was just one classroom at a time. Ryan smiled despite everything. When she got pregnant, she was terrified and thrilled in equal measure. We weren't married, weren't even engaged yet, but she said Sophie was the best mistake we ever made. She sounds wonderful. She was, and she'd be furious about what her parents are doing. She never had a great relationship with them. They disapproved of her career choice, thought teaching was beneath their daughter. They wanted her to go into law or medicine, something worthy of their investment in her education. But she chose teaching anyway. She chose what made her happy, even when it disappointed them. Ryan's voice caught. I think that's why they're doing this. It's not really about Sophie. It's about finally getting control over the part of Amanda that always slipped through their fingers. Olivia was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was thoughtful. During the investigation, when everything was falling apart, my board kept saying they were trying to protect the company. But really they were protecting themselves, their reputations, their investments, the actual company, the mission, the employees, the clients. That was secondary. What did you do? I fought, not because I thought I could win, but because someone needed to say that what they were doing was wrong. That scapegoating me didn't actually solve the problem of corporate espionage. That throwing away 10 years of work because it was inconvenient was cowardice, not leadership. Did it matter? To them? No. They pushed me out anyway, but it mattered to me. I needed to know I didn't go down quietly, that I made them work for it. Ryan understood that. The need to fight even when defeat seemed certain, the refusal to make it easy for people who were trying to take everything. His phone buzzed a third time. Against his better judgment, Ryan looked. We're increasing our settlement offer. Full college fund, trust fund doubled, guaranteed visitation schedule. You maintain parental rights, but we get primary custody. Think about what's best for Sophie. The words hit like a physical blow. They were offering him a way out, a way to stay in Sophie's life without the battle, without the risk of losing her completely. What does it say? Olivia asked. Ryan handed her the phone, watched her face harden as she read. They're scared, she said. What? They're making offers. That means their lawyers aren't confident about Thursday. They want you to settle because they think you might actually win, or they're being generous. Ryan, Olivia's voice was sharp. Wealthy people don't make generous offers out of kindness. They make them out of fear. If they thought they could win in court, they'd let the judge decide. The fact that they're trying to settle means something about your case is stronger than they're comfortable with. Hope flickered in Ryan's chest, dangerous and terrifying. David said the same thing last week, that their aggressive tactics suggested weakness, not strength. Then believe it. Believe that you have a real chance. Ryan wanted to, but wanting something and believing it were different things entirely. I need air, he said abruptly. He stepped onto the deck into cold wind that cut through his shirt. The sky was dark and heavy with clouds, but a few stars managed to break through. Somewhere out there, Sophie was probably asleep, curled up with the stuffed triceratops he'd bought her for her last birthday. Did she know what was happening? The Whitmores had promised not to tell her about the custody battle until it was resolved, but Ryan didn't trust that promise. The door slid open behind him. Olivia appeared with 2 blankets. She draped one over his shoulders and wrapped the other around herself. You don't have to keep checking on me, Ryan said. I know. They stood together in the cold and dark, 2 people who'd been strangers days ago and were now something else. Not friends exactly, something more complicated than that. I've been thinking, Olivia said, about Thursday, about what you're walking into. And? I want to help. Ryan turned to look at her. What do you mean? I mean, I want to be there. In the courtroom. As a character witness or just moral support, whatever you need. You don't even know me. I know enough. Olivia's voice was firm. I know you're a good father who's fighting for his daughter. I know the people attacking you are using wealth and influence to manipulate the system. And I know what it's like to face that kind of power alone. Olivia, you have your own battles, your own legal issues to resolve. My legal issues are paperwork and negotiations. Yours are about keeping your family intact. There's a difference. She looked at him directly. Let me help, please. Ryan felt something shift in his chest. The overwhelming loneliness he'd been carrying for months suddenly felt less absolute. I don't know what you could do, he said honestly. Neither do I, but we'll figure it out. She pulled the blanket tighter. You said they're painting you as unstable and isolated. What if we counter that narrative? How? By showing the judge that you have support, that you're not some struggling single father barely holding it together, that you have relationships, connections, people who believe in you. But I don't. Not really. Amanda's friends drifted away after she died. My family is across the country. I've been so focused on just surviving that I haven't maintained friendships. You have me now." The simplicity of that statement hit Ryan hard. "We met 3 days ago," he said weakly. "So? Does that make it less real?" Olivia shook her head. "Sometimes the most important connections happen fast. When you meet someone who understands something fundamental about what you're going through, that's not less valid because it's new." Ryan wanted to argue, wanted to say it was too much to ask. But the truth was, he desperately needed someone in his corner who wasn't being paid to be there. "My lawyer would need to approve you as a witness," he said carefully. "Then call him tomorrow. Ask." Olivia smiled slightly. "What's the worst that happens? He says no, and I drive back to San Francisco? You'd really do this? Come to court for a stranger's custody battle?" "You're not a stranger anymore." She looked out at the darkness. "And maybe I need this too. Maybe I need to be part of something that actually matters. Something that's about protecting what's good instead of salvaging what's broken." They stood in silence, the weight of the offer settling between them. "Okay," Ryan said finally. "I'll call David tomorrow, see if it's even possible." "Good." The first drops of rain began to fall, cold and sharp. They retreated inside, shaking off water and pulling the sliding door closed against the storm. The rest of the evening passed quietly. They finished the movie without really watching it, both lost in their own thoughts. When they finally said goodnight and retreated to separate bedrooms, Ryan lay awake listening to rain hammer the roof. For the first time since this nightmare began, he felt something that might have been hope. And in the room down the hall, Olivia lay awake too, wondering what she'd just committed herself to and why it felt more right than anything had in months. The storm raged outside, washing the mountains clean, preparing the world for whatever Monday would bring. Monday morning broke with startling clarity, the storm having scrubbed the sky clean overnight. Ryan woke early and found Olivia already dressed, her laptop open on the kitchen counter, paper spread across the surface in organized chaos. "You're up early," he said, pouring coffee. "Couldn't sleep. I've been thinking about your case." She gestured to her laptop screen. "I did some research on family court precedents in Washington state. Cases where grandparents filed for custody against biological parents." Ryan moved closer, reading over her shoulder. "Olivia, you didn't have to—" "I know, but I wanted to understand what we're dealing with." She pulled up a document. "In the past 5 years, there have been 43 similar cases in this county. Biological parents won in 37 of them. The 6 losses? They all involve documented abuse, addiction, or criminal records. So the odds are in my favor." "Statistically, yes. But the Whitmores aren't relying on statistics. They're building an emotional narrative." She clicked to another file. "I also looked into their financial claims. The trust fund, the private schools, all of it. Do you know how much they're promising to invest in Sophie's future?" Margaret mentioned numbers during the initial mediation, something around $2 million. $2.3 million according to the court filings. Olivia's expression was unreadable. "That's a lot of money to throw at a 6-year-old. It's meant to be intimidating. It's meant to be decisive. But here's what I don't understand." She turned to face him fully. "If they have that much money to invest in Sophie's future, where was it before? Why didn't they set up the trust fund when Amanda was alive? Why wait until now, when they're using it as leverage?" Ryan had never thought about that. "I don't know. Amanda never mentioned any trust fund. Because it didn't exist. I checked public records. The trust was created 8 months ago, right around the time they started planning this custody battle." Olivia's voice sharpened. "They're not offering Sophie advantages they always had. They're creating advantages specifically to use against you." The implication hit Ryan like cold water. They're manufacturing evidence of their superiority. Exactly. And if we can prove that the trust fund is a legal strategy rather than genuine long-term planning for Sophie's welfare, it weakens their financial argument considerably. Ryan sat down heavily at the kitchen table. "How would we prove that?" "I'd need to see the full trust documentation, creation dates, funding sources, administration details. Your lawyer probably has copies in discovery. David has everything they've filed, but I don't know if he's looked at it from this angle." "Then we call him now." Olivia checked her watch. "It's 8:30. His office should be open." Ryan dialed David's number, putting the phone on speaker. The lawyer answered on the third ring. Ryan, everything okay? Yeah, I'm here with Olivia Grant. We've been talking about the case, and she has some questions about the Whitmores' financial claims. There was a pause. Olivia Grant, the woman who's sharing the cabin with you? That's right. Ryan, I need to be very careful here. Who is this person and why is she involved in your case? Olivia leaned toward the phone. Mr. Chen, I'm a friend of Ryan's. I have experience with financial analysis and legal strategy. I've been reviewing the Whitmores' court filings, and I noticed some irregularities in the trust fund timeline. With all due respect, Ms. Grant, you're not Ryan's attorney. Discussing case strategy with third parties could be problematic. What if I wasn't a third party? Olivia said suddenly. What if I was a character witness? Ryan looked at her sharply. They'd discussed this last night, but hearing her say it to David made it real. David was silent for a long moment. A character witness. Someone who can speak to Ryan's fitness as a parent. Yes. How long have you known my client? 4 days. 4 days. David's skepticism was palpable. The Whitmores' lawyers will tear that apart in cross-examination. Let them try. Olivia's voice was steady. I met Ryan under unusual circumstances. We've spent significant time together. I've observed how he talks about his daughter, how he prioritizes her well-being, how he handles stress and adversity. 4 days of genuine observation can be more valuable than years of casual acquaintance. Or it can look like a desperate attempt to manufacture support. David sighed. Look, I appreciate the offer, but character witnesses need to be unimpeachable. The opposing counsel will dig into your background, your motivations, everything. Are you prepared for that level of scrutiny? Ryan watched Olivia's face, waiting for her to back down. Instead, she straightened her shoulders. I'm the former CEO of a tech company that just went through an SEC investigation. My background has already been scrutinized by federal regulators and found clean. I have nothing to hide. Former CEO, David repeated. Why former? I was forced out by my board during the investigation. Not because I did anything wrong, but because they wanted a scapegoat. The investigation cleared me completely. There was another long pause. Ryan could almost hear David's lawyer brain working through the implications. That could actually help, David said slowly. Someone with corporate leadership experience cleared by federal investigation, vouching for Ryan's character. It presents a different narrative than the isolated, struggling father the Whitmores are trying to paint. Exactly, Olivia said. But I need to know, what's your real motivation here? Because if there's any suggestion of romantic involvement, any hint that this is about something other than genuine character assessment, it will backfire spectacularly. Ryan felt heat rise in his face. There's nothing like that. Olivia's helping because I know what it's like to be attacked by people with more money and power, Olivia finished. And because watching someone fight for their child reminded me why integrity matters more than winning. David was quiet. Then, all right, I'll consider it. But I need to meet with you first, Ms. Grant. Today, if possible. I need to hear your full story and assess whether putting you on the stand helps or hurts our case. I can drive down this afternoon. My office at 3. I'll text you the address. David's tone shifted, becoming more businesslike. Ryan, I also need to talk to you about something else. The Whitmores filed another motion this morning. Ryan's stomach dropped. What kind of motion? They're requesting an emergency hearing to move up the custody decision. They're claiming that new evidence has emerged suggesting Sophie is at immediate risk. What evidence? That's insane. They're citing the fact that you left town days before a scheduled hearing. They're arguing it shows flight risk and instability. I told you I was going to a cabin. You approved it. I know. And I'll argue that. But they're spinning it as abandonment, leaving Sophie with a neighbor while you run away to the mountains. David's frustration was evident. It's a reach, but Judge Morrison might grant the emergency hearing just to be safe. When? Tomorrow. Tuesday instead of Thursday. The room tilted. Ryan gripped the edge of the table. Tomorrow, he repeated numbly. I'm not ready. We're not ready. We don't have a choice. I'm filing an objection, but we need to prepare for the possibility that this is happening on their timeline now. David's voice softened. Come back to the city today, both of you. We'll meet at my office and go through everything. After the call ended, Ryan sat in stunned silence. Olivia moved around the kitchen, cleaning up her papers with methodical precision. Say something, she said finally. They're doing this because of the settlement offer. Because I didn't respond. Ryan's voice was hollow. They're punishing me for not taking their deal. They're panicking. There's a difference. Olivia sat down across from him. David was right. This is a desperate move. They're trying to throw you off balance, make you walk into court unprepared and rattled. It's working. Only if you let it. She reached across the table, her hand covering his. Listen to me. We have today to prepare. We have David's expertise, and we have the truth on our side. That has to be enough. What if it's not? Then we fight anyway, because the alternative is giving up, and I don't think you know how to do that. Ryan looked at her hand on his, warm and steady. 4 days ago, she'd been a stranger. Now she was the only person who seemed to understand the magnitude of what he was facing. We should pack, he said quietly. It's a 3-hour drive back to Seattle. They moved through the cabin in coordinated silence, gathering belongings and erasing evidence of their presence. Ryan stripped his bed and washed the sheets, a small gesture of gratitude to a place that had given him brief sanctuary. Olivia cleaned the kitchen and made sure the fireplace was completely cold. By 10 o'clock, they were standing on the deck one last time, looking out at the mountains that had witnessed the beginning of something neither of them fully understood yet. I'm glad the property manager screwed up, Ryan said. Olivia glanced at him. Yeah? Yeah, I came here looking for isolation, but I think I needed the opposite. We both did. She smiled slightly. Thank you for not kicking me out that first night. Thank you for not calling the police on the sketchy guy who showed up at midnight. They locked up the cabin and loaded their cars. Ryan watched Olivia program David's office address into her GPS, the reality of what she was doing hitting him fully. You don't have to do this, he said. You can still walk away. I know. She closed her car door and looked at him through the window. But I'm not going to. The drive back to Seattle felt longer than the drive out had been. Ryan's mind raced through scenarios, each worse than the last. What would he say if the judge asked him directly why he'd left town? How would he explain Olivia without making it sound suspicious? What if Sophie was brought to the hearing? What if he had to watch her being told she'd be living with her grandparents? His phone rang as he crossed the county line. An unknown number. Against his better judgment, he answered. Ryan Carter. Mr. Carter, this is Robert Whitmore. The voice was deep, cultured, the kind of authority that came from decades of being listened to. I believe my wife has been trying to reach you. Ryan's hands tightened on the wheel. Mr. Whitmore, I've been instructed by my attorney not to have direct contact with you or your wife. Yes, the lawyers and their protocols, but we're all adults here, aren't we? Surely we can have a civilized conversation. I don't think that's a good idea. I'm calling to make one final offer, a very generous offer, one that I think, if you're thinking clearly about Sophie's future, you'll seriously consider. Ryan wanted to hang up, should have hung up, but something in Robert's tone, a calculated friendliness that felt more threatening than any legal filing, kept him on the line. I'm listening. We're prepared to withdraw the custody petition entirely. Full parental rights remain with you. In exchange, you agree to relocate to Seattle. We'll pay for a better apartment in a good school district. You'll have guaranteed access to Sophie's trust fund for her education and health care. And we get liberal visitation, holidays, summers, major events. A grandparent relationship, nothing more. It was everything Ryan had hoped for months ago, before the battle turned vicious, before the lawyers and the character assassination and the emergency motions. Why now? Ryan asked. Because tomorrow's hearing will be unpleasant for everyone involved. Sophie will inevitably learn about the conflict. Court proceedings will be part of public record. Why put her through that if we can reach an agreement privately? Or maybe your lawyers told you that you're going to lose. Robert's laugh was dry. My lawyers are very confident, Mr. Carter. But unlike them, I'm not interested in winning. I'm interested in my granddaughter's well-being. If that were true, you never would have filed for custody in the first place. We filed because we were concerned. We still are. But perhaps we can address those concerns through cooperation rather than litigation. Ryan took a breath, choosing his words carefully. I appreciate the offer, but any agreement needs to go through our attorneys. I'm not making decisions without legal counsel. How very careful of you. Robert's tone cooled. But consider this. Tomorrow's hearing will examine every aspect of your life, your finances, your living situation, your employment history, your romantic entanglements. Are you certain you want all of that exposed in open court? The threat was barely veiled. Ryan felt anger cut through his anxiety. I have nothing to hide. Everyone has something to hide, Mr. Carter, and our investigators are very thorough. For instance, we know about the woman you've been staying with at the mountain cabin, Olivia Grant, former CEO under federal investigation. Quite a coincidence that you two ended up at the same remote location. Ryan's blood went cold. There's nothing inappropriate. I'm sure there isn't. But appearances matter, don't they? Especially in family court. A single father, days before a custody hearing, sharing a private cabin with a woman he barely knows. How do you think Judge Morrison will interpret that? You had us followed. We had our concerns verified. There's a difference. Robert's voice became almost gentle. This is what I'm trying to save you from, Ryan. The ugliness, the invasiveness. Take our offer. Give Sophie the advantages she deserves. Maintain your relationship with her. Everyone wins. Except I lose custody. You maintain parental rights. That's not losing. It's not winning either. Ryan felt clarity cut through the fear. My answer is no. I'll see you in court tomorrow. He hung up before Robert could respond, his hands shaking so badly he had to pull over. He sat on the shoulder of the highway, semis roaring past, trying to control his breathing. They had photographs. Evidence of him and Olivia at the cabin. The Whitmore's lawyers would twist it into something sordid, something that proved Ryan's instability and poor judgment. His phone buzzed. A text from Olivia. Just past exit 47. Everything okay? Ryan stared at the message. He should tell her, should warn her what she was walking into, that the Whitmores knew about her, had already begun investigating her background, would use her presence against both of them. He typed, Robert Whitmore just called. They know about you, about the cabin. They're going to use it against us. The response came quickly. Let them try. Keep driving. We deal with this together. Ryan pulled back onto the highway, his jaw set. The Whitmores had made a critical mistake. They'd assumed that threatening exposure would make him back down. Instead, it had shown him exactly what kind of people he was fighting. The kind who hired investigators to photograph a grieving father at a mountain retreat. The kind who would twist an innocent coincidence into evidence of moral failing. The kind who saw their granddaughter as a prize to be won rather than a child to be loved. He wasn't backing down, not now, not ever. David Chen's office was in a modest building in downtown Seattle, the kind of place that prioritized function over flash. Ryan arrived first, parking in the garage and taking the elevator to the third floor. The waiting room was empty except for a tired-looking receptionist who barely glanced up as he entered. Ryan Carter for David Chen. He's expecting you. Conference room at the end of the hall. David was already there, papers spread across the long table, his laptop open to multiple documents. He looked up as Ryan entered, his expression grave. Tell me about the phone call. Ryan recounted the conversation, watching David's face darken with each detail. They're playing hardball, David said when Ryan finished. The photographs, the private investigation, the last-minute settlement offer. It's all designed to intimidate you into submission. Is it going to work? Will the judge care that Olivia was at the cabin? Depends on how we frame it. David leaned back in his chair. If we're defensive, if we act like there's something to hide, it looks bad. But if we're transparent, this was a booking error. Two strangers ended up sharing space. They formed a friendship. It becomes a non-issue. Robert made it sound like proof of instability. Robert Whitmore is a bully with expensive lawyers. Don't let him get in your head. David checked his watch. Ms. Grant should be here soon. When she arrives, I need to interview her separately. Understand her story, her background, assess whether she can handle cross-examination. She can handle it. You've known her 4 days. I know, but I trust her. David studied him for a long moment. That's either the beginning of something good or a disaster waiting to happen. We'll find out which tomorrow. Olivia arrived 20 minutes later, dressed in professional attire that transformed her from the casual hiker Ryan had spent the weekend with into the CEO she'd been. She carried a briefcase and wore an expression of calm determination. "Ms. Grant?" David stood to shake her hand. "Thank you for coming. Thank you for seeing me on short notice." "Ryan, why don't you wait in the lobby? I need to speak with Ms. Grant privately." But Ryan left reluctantly, settling into an uncomfortable chair and scrolling through his phone without seeing anything. 20 minutes passed, then 40. Finally, after nearly an hour, David emerged alone. "Where's Olivia?" Ryan asked. "In the conference room, reviewing case files. Come with me." They walked to David's private office, a cramped space dominated by filing cabinets and legal texts. David closed the door and gestured for Ryan to sit. "She's impressive," David said without preamble. "Smart, articulate, completely unflappable. I threw every question the Whitmore's lawyers will ask, and she handled them perfectly." "So you'll use her as a witness?" "I will, but there's something you need to understand." David sat on the edge of his desk. "Her testimony will be powerful, but it will also open her up to attacks. The SEC investigation, her forced resignation, her corporate history, all of it will be fair game. Are you comfortable with that?" "It's not my comfort that matters, it's hers." She says she's prepared, but I need to know you are too. Because once she takes that stand, there's no taking it back. Her credibility becomes linked to yours. Ryan thought about Olivia's face in the firelight, talking about choosing truth over silence, about fighting even when the outcome was uncertain. "She knows what she's doing," Ryan said, "and I trust her judgment." "All right." David moved to his computer, pulling up a document. "Then let's talk strategy. The emergency hearing tomorrow will focus on their claim that you're a flight risk. We counter that you informed me of your location, that you are reachable at all times, that taking a few days before a stressful hearing is not evidence of abandonment." "What about the photographs?" "We address them head on. Yes, you shared a cabin with a woman due to a booking error. Yes, you formed a friendship. No, there was nothing inappropriate. We present Olivia as a character witness who can speak to your devotion to Sophie based on direct observation." David looked at Ryan seriously. "But we need to be absolutely certain there's nothing else. No other contact with Olivia beyond what you've told me. No romantic involvement. No physical intimacy. Because if they have evidence of anything like that, it will destroy our case." "There's nothing," Ryan said firmly. "We talked. We hiked. We watched a movie. That's it." "Good. Because tomorrow they're going to suggest otherwise. They're going to paint a picture of a father who abandoned his daughter to shack up with a stranger. We need to stay calm, stay consistent, and let the truth speak for itself." David pulled up another file. "Now, Olivia mentioned something interesting about the trust fund. Walk me through what she found." For the next 2 hours, they dissected every aspect of the Whitmore's case. The trust fund created specifically for the custody battle. The private school promises that had never materialized before Amanda's death. The financial projections that relied on assumptions rather than concrete commitments. Olivia joined them eventually, bringing fresh perspective and sharp questions. She'd spent her lunch hour digging deeper into public records, finding patterns in the Whitmore's financial history that suggested their wealth was less stable than they claimed. They made significant investments in a tech startup that went bankrupt 18 months ago, Olivia explained, showing them documentation on her laptop. Lost nearly $3 million. Then they sold one of their rental properties at a loss. Their current liquid assets are probably half of what they're claiming. "How does that help us?" Ryan asked. "Because it means the trust fund promises might be empty. They're projecting future wealth to impress the judge, but their actual ability to deliver those advantages is questionable." Olivia looked at David. "Can we subpoena their financial records? Force them to prove they can actually fund what they're promising?" "In a normal hearing, yes. In an emergency hearing tomorrow, unlikely. But we can raise the question, plant doubt." David smiled grimly. "This is good work, Ms. Grant. You have an eye for financial deception." I learned from the best," Olivia said dryly. "My former CFO was an expert at making numbers tell whatever story he wanted." By the time they finished, it was after 7. Ryan's head throbbed with information and strategy. David walked them to the elevator, his expression serious. Get some sleep tonight, both of you. Tomorrow will be brutal, but we're as prepared as we can be. He looked at Olivia. Are you certain about this? Once you're in that courtroom, there's no walking away. I'm certain, Olivia said. Then I'll see you both at 8:30. We meet at the courthouse, go over final prep, and face whatever Judge Morrison throws at us. In the parking garage, Ryan and Olivia stood beside their cars, exhaustion settling over both of them. I should get a hotel, Olivia said. David mentioned a place near the courthouse that has last-minute availability. Or you could stay at my apartment. The words came out before Ryan could think them through. It's small, but there's a couch. And we should probably arrive together anyway, given that we're presenting a united front. Olivia studied him. Are you sure? The Whitmores might have investigators watching your place. Let them watch. We have nothing to hide. All right then, lead the way. Ryan's apartment was exactly what he'd described. Small, tidy, filled with evidence of Sophie's presence. Drawings covered the refrigerator. A collection of plastic dinosaurs lined the windowsill. A pile of children's books sat on the coffee table next to a half-finished puzzle. Olivia walked through the space slowly, taking it all in. This is lovely, she said quietly. It's cramped and old, and the heat barely works in winter. It's a home. There's a difference. She picked up one of Sophie's drawings, a family portrait in crayon showing a stick figure labeled Daddy, another labeled Me, and a third with wings labeled Mommy Watching from Heaven. Ryan's throat tightened. She drew that last month for Mother's Day. It's beautiful. Olivia set it down carefully. She knows she's loved Ryan. That's obvious in everything here. They ordered takeout and ate in comfortable silence, both too exhausted for meaningful conversation. Ryan set up the couch with sheets and a pillow, acutely aware of how strange this was. 4 days ago, he'd driven to the mountains desperate for solitude. Now he was opening his home to someone who'd become essential in ways he couldn't fully articulate. Thank you, Olivia said as he finished arranging the makeshift bed, for letting me be part of this. I know it's unconventional. Everything about this situation is unconventional. Ryan sat in the armchair across from the couch. But I'm grateful. I don't think I could face tomorrow alone. You're not alone. Not anymore. They sat in the lamplight, the city humming outside the windows, Sophie's artwork bearing witness to the life Ryan was fighting to preserve. What time should we leave in the morning? Olivia asked. 7:30. The courthouse is 20 minutes away, but I want time to settle before the hearing. Then we should sleep. But neither of them moved. The weight of tomorrow pressed down, making rest feel impossible. Ryan? Olivia's voice was soft. What happens if we lose? We won't. But if we do? Ryan forced himself to consider it, the reality he'd been avoiding for months. If we lose, the Whitmores get primary custody. I'd have visitation rights, weekends probably, and some holidays. Sophie would live in their mansion, attend their private schools, grow up in their world. His voice cracked. And I'd become a visitor in my daughter's life instead of her father. That's not going to happen. You can't know that. No, Olivia agreed, but I can fight like hell to prevent it, and so can you. They finally retreated to their separate spaces, Ryan to his bedroom that still held traces of the life he'd shared with Amanda, Olivia to the couch, surrounded by evidence of the child at the center of everything. Ryan lay awake, staring at the ceiling, counting down the hours until a judge would decide his future. Somewhere across town, Sophie was probably asleep, safe in the temporary care of his neighbor, unaware that tomorrow would determine the rest of her childhood. In the living room, Olivia lay awake too, wondering what she'd gotten herself into and why it felt more right than anything had in years. The city lights filtered through the curtains, casting shadows that looked like the bars of a cage or the rungs of a ladder. Everything depended on perspective. And tomorrow, they'd find out which one would define their future. Dawn came too quickly, pale light creeping through the windows like an unwelcome visitor. Ryan had managed perhaps 2 hours of broken sleep, his mind cycling through worst-case scenarios until exhaustion finally dragged him under. He woke to the smell of coffee and found Olivia already dressed, her hair pulled back in a severe bun that made her look every inch the corporate executive she'd once been. Couldn't sleep either? He asked, his voice rough. Not really. She handed him a mug. I've been reviewing my testimony notes. making sure I can answer anything they throw at me without hesitation. Ryan glanced at the clock. 6:15. They had just over an hour before they needed to leave. I'm going to shower, he said. Try to look like someone capable of raising a child. Ryan, Olivia caught his arm. You already look like that. Don't let them make you believe otherwise. The shower was scalding, steam filling the small bathroom until Ryan could barely breathe. He stood under the spray and tried to center himself, to find the strength he'd need to walk into that courtroom and fight. The psychological evaluation David had arranged was scheduled for next week, assuming today's hearing didn't end everything first. The Whitmores had forced this emergency session, claiming Ryan's trip to the mountains proved he was unstable, unreliable, a flight risk. They were accelerating their attack because they sensed weakness, or because they were afraid. Ryan dressed in the only suit he owned, a charcoal gray number he'd bought for Amanda's funeral and hadn't worn since. It still fit, though the reflection in the mirror looked like a stranger. Haggard, desperate, nothing like the confident father he wanted the judge to see. Olivia was waiting in the living room, her expression unreadable as she studied Sophie's artwork on the walls. She draws a lot, Olivia observed. Every day. Usually dinosaurs or space or her classmates. Ryan straightened his tie. The therapist says it's how she processes things. Emotions she can't articulate yet. Has she drawn anything about the custody situation? I don't think she knows enough to draw about it. I've tried to shield her from the details. Ryan felt guilt twist in his stomach. Maybe that was wrong. Maybe I should have prepared her better. You protected her from adult problems. That's called good parenting. Olivia picked up her briefcase. We should go. David wanted us there early. The drive to the courthouse was silent, both of them locked in their own thoughts. Seattle's morning traffic was already building, brake lights stretching ahead in ribbons of red. Ryan's hands were slick on the steering wheel. Beside him, Olivia sat with rigid posture, her face a mask of composure that he was beginning to recognize as her armor. Thank you, Ryan said suddenly. I don't think I've said that properly. For everything you're doing, you could have walked away at any point. So could you, from the mountains, from the fight, from all of it. But you didn't. Olivia looked at him. We're both here because walking away isn't an option when something matters this much. The courthouse was an imposing concrete structure downtown, all sharp angles and tinted windows. David was waiting on the steps, dressed in an immaculate navy suit that made Ryan feel even more disheveled by comparison. Good, you're early. David ushered them inside, through security, and into a small conference room on the second floor. We have 20 minutes before the hearing. Let's go over the key points one more time. He spread documents across the table, pointing to highlighted sections as he spoke. Judge Morrison is fair but conservative. She'll be looking for stability, consistency, evidence that Sophie's needs come first. The Whitmores will argue that Ryan's trip to the mountains shows abandonment and poor judgment. We counter that it was a planned retreat with full disclosure to counsel, and that self-care before a stressful event is responsible, not reckless. What about the photographs? Ryan asked. They'll try to enter them as evidence of inappropriate conduct. We object on grounds of relevance and invasion of privacy. Even if the judge allows them, we've already addressed the situation. A booking error, a chance encounter, nothing improper. David looked at Olivia. You ready for this? Yes. They'll attack your credibility, your forced resignation, the investigation, your sudden appearance in Ryan's life. You need to stay calm, answer directly, don't get defensive. I understand. Good. David checked his watch. The Whitmores will have 3 attorneys in there. Marcus Webb is lead counsel. He's aggressive, condescending, will try to provoke emotional responses. Don't give him the satisfaction. Sarah Chen handles the financial arguments. She's meticulous and will pick apart every dollar of Ryan's budget. And James Kowalski focuses on character assassination. He's the one who'll come after both of you the hardest. Ryan felt his chest constrict. 3 attorneys versus 1. 3 attorneys versus truth, David corrected. And truth has a way of cutting through expensive legal theatrics. A bailiff appeared at the door. Judge Morrison is ready for you. The courtroom was smaller than Ryan had imagined, more like a conference room than the dramatic spaces he'd seen on television. Judge Morrison sat behind an elevated desk, a woman in her late 50s with silver hair and reading glasses perched on her nose. The Whitmores were already seated on the left side. Margaret in a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than Ryan's monthly rent, Robert in charcoal pinstripes, flanked by their legal team that looked like they'd stepped out of a corporate law firm advertisement. Margaret's eyes found Ryan, and for just a moment he saw raw grief there. The loss of her daughter transformed into this battle for control over what remained. Then her expression hardened, and she looked away. "All rise," the bailiff intoned. Judge Morrison surveyed the room with sharp eyes. "Please be seated. This is an emergency hearing regarding the custody of Sophie Marie Carter, age 6. The petitioners, Margaret and Robert Whitmore, have requested an accelerated timeline based on allegations of flight risk and abandonment. Mr. Chen, your client is aware of these allegations." David stood. "Yes, Your Honor, and we're prepared to address them fully." "Very well, Mr. Webb. You may present the petitioner's case." Marcus Webb rose, a tall man with perfectly coiffed silver hair and a voice that filled the room with practiced authority. "Your Honor, the Whitmores come before you today with heavy hearts but clear purpose. They seek to protect their granddaughter from a father who, despite his professed devotion, has demonstrated a pattern of instability and poor judgment that places the child at risk." Ryan forced himself to stay still, to keep his expression neutral even as anger burned in his chest. "Just days before this originally scheduled hearing," Webb continued, "Mr. Carter abandoned his daughter and fled to a remote mountain location. He left Sophie in the care of a neighbor, not family, not professional childcare, but a casual acquaintance, while he pursued personal recreation." "That's not accurate," David interjected. "Mr. Carter informed me of his location and maintained regular contact with both myself and Sophie's caregiver. Which brings us to the second concerning development." Webb walked to the evidence table and retrieved a manila folder. "Your Honor, I'd like to enter into evidence photographs taken at the mountain cabin where Mr. Carter stayed." David was on his feet. "Objection. These photographs were obtained through invasive surveillance of my client during what was meant to be a private retreat. They constitute a violation of privacy and are not relevant to custody determination." "They're absolutely relevant," Webb shot back. "They show Mr. Carter sharing intimate accommodations with a woman he barely knows, engaging in behavior that demonstrates questionable judgment and moral character." Judge Morrison held up a hand. "I'll review the photographs in chambers before deciding on admissibility. What else do you have, Mr. Webb?" "We have testimony from neighbors regarding Mr. Carter's erratic work schedule, his frequent absences, the inadequate supervision provided to Sophie. We have financial records showing mounting debt and insufficient resources to provide proper care. And we have expert testimony regarding the advantages the Whitmores can offer: educational opportunities, financial security, emotional stability." "Those are advantages of wealth, not parenting," David said, "unless we're suggesting that only the rich should be permitted to raise children. We're suggesting that when wealth can be responsibly deployed to benefit a child, the court should consider it." Webb gestured to the Whitmores. "My clients lost their only daughter 2 years ago. They've watched their granddaughter struggle in substandard living conditions while her father works multiple jobs and leaves her with whoever is available. They're offering Sophie a chance at the life her mother would have wanted for her." "Her mother wanted Sophie raised by her father," Ryan said before he could stop himself. Judge Morrison's gaze swung to him. "Mr. Carter, you'll have your opportunity to speak. Please remain silent until called upon." "Yes, Your Honor, I apologize." Webb smiled slightly, pleased to have provoked a reaction. "We rest our preliminary case pending review of the photographic evidence." Judge Morrison made a note. "Mr. Chen, your response?" David stood, his demeanor calm and measured in stark contrast to Webb's theatrical presentation. "Your Honor, this emergency hearing is based on a fundamental mischaracterization of events. My client did not flee or abandon his daughter. He took a brief weekend retreat at a location he disclosed to me with arrangements made for Sophie's care, before facing what he knew would be one of the most stressful events of his life. That's not instability. That's self-awareness and responsible planning." "And the woman in the photographs?" Judge Morrison asked. "We're prepared to address that directly. I'd like to call Olivia Grant to the stand." Ryan felt his pulse spike as Olivia stood and walked to the witness box. She moved with the confidence of someone who'd testified before, who understood that courtrooms were just another type of boardroom where truth competed with narrative. The bailiff swore her in, David approached with a gentle smile. Ms. Grant, please state your occupation. I'm currently consulting in corporate finance. Until recently, I was the CEO of Secure Data Solutions, a technology company specializing in data encryption. And how did you meet Ryan Carter? Through a booking error at a mountain cabin rental. We both had legitimate reservations for the same property. When we arrived and discovered the mistake, we agreed to share the space rather than return to the city in the middle of the night. So you were strangers when you met. Complete strangers. During the time you shared the cabin, what did you observe about Mr. Carter? Olivia's voice was steady, clear. I observed a man under extraordinary stress who, despite his own struggles, spoke constantly about his daughter, her interests, her education, her emotional well-being. He showed me drawings she'd made, told me stories about their daily routines. Every conversation eventually came back to Sophie and what was best for her. Did you witness any behavior that suggested instability or poor judgment? No, I witnessed someone trying to find strength before facing a difficult situation. We went on hikes, had conversations, shared meals. Everything was appropriate and respectful. David nodded. Thank you, Ms. Grant. Your witness, Mr. Webb. Marcus Webb approached the stand like a predator who'd spotted prey. His smile was sharp. Ms. Grant, you testified that you're currently consulting. That's a polite way of saying you're unemployed, isn't it? I'm between formal positions while evaluating opportunities. Because you were forced out of your previous position during a federal investigation, correct? I resigned as part of a board decision during an SEC investigation of my company. The investigation subsequently cleared me of any wrongdoing. But the damage was done to your reputation, wasn't it? Your career in tatters, your credibility questioned. Some might say you were desperate for purpose, for meaning, for a cause to champion. David stood. Objection. Counsel is testifying rather than questioning. Sustained. Mr. Webb, ask your questions without editorial. Webb barely paused. Ms. Grant, isn't it true that you have a history of poor judgment in trusting people? That your CFO betrayed you because you failed to recognize his duplicity? My CFO committed fraud. That speaks to his character, not mine. Does it? Or does it speak to your inability to assess people accurately? Webb leaned against the witness box. You claim to have observed Mr. Carter's fitness as a father during 4 days of acquaintance, but your track record suggests you're not the best judge of character. Olivia's expression didn't change. I spent 10 years building relationships with employees, investors, and clients. The vast majority of those relationships were built on mutual trust and respect. One person's betrayal doesn't erase that history. 4 days, Webb repeated. You've known Ryan Carter for 4 days, yet you're willing to testify about his parental fitness. Isn't this really about your own need to feel relevant again? To insert yourself into a situation where you don't belong? I'm testifying because I witnessed something true. A father who loves his daughter. That doesn't require months of observation. It requires paying attention. Or it requires desperation to matter. Webb turned to the judge. Your Honor, this witness has no credible basis to assess Mr. Carter's parental fitness. She's a stranger with compromised judgment and clear motivations to manufacture support for a man she barely knows. I'll determine the weight of her testimony, Judge Morrison said. Continue your questions or step down, Mr. Webb. Just one more question. Webb looked at Olivia with calculated precision. During your time at the cabin, did you and Mr. Carter share any physical intimacy? No. Did you sleep in the same room? No. The same bed? No. But you did develop feelings for him, didn't you? A romantic interest that compromises your objectivity? Ryan watched Olivia's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. I develop respect for someone facing an unjust situation with dignity. If you're calling that romance, you don't understand either concept. Several people in the gallery shifted. Judge Morrison's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in her eyes. No further questions, Webb said, returning to his table with apparent satisfaction. David stood for redirect. Ms. Grant, in your professional career, how many employees did you manage? At peak, approximately 200. And that required assessing character, trustworthiness, competence every day. Based on that experience and your observation of Ryan Carter, do you believe he's fit to parent his daughter? Absolutely. I believe Sophie is exactly where she should be, with a father who puts her first, even when it costs him everything. Thank you. No further questions. Olivia stepped down, and Ryan caught her eye as she returned to her seat. She gave him the smallest nod. She'd held her ground against Webb's attacks, hadn't flinched or broken. Mr. Chen, do you have additional witnesses? Judge Morrison asked. I'd like to call Ryan Carter to the stand. Ryan stood on legs that felt unreliable. The walk to the witness box seemed impossibly long. He was sworn in, his hand shaking slightly on the Bible, and then David was standing before him with an expression of calm encouragement. Mr. Carter, tell us about a typical day with Sophie. Ryan took a breath, centering himself on what mattered. I wake her at 6:30 for school. She's not a morning person, so there's usually negotiation about what to wear. She has strong opinions about clothes. A few people in the gallery smiled. Ryan continued, I make breakfast, usually something quick because we're always running late. Toast, cereal, sometimes scrambled eggs if we have time. Then I drive her to school, walk her to her classroom, talk to her teacher about any concerns or updates. I work at Lincoln High as a history teacher until 3. Then I pick Sophie up, take her to after-school activities or home for homework. We have dinner together every night. She tells me about her day. We read before bed, always at least one story, sometimes 3, if she's particularly persuasive. What does Sophie know about this custody battle? Very little. I've told her that her grandparents miss her mother and want to spend more time with her. I didn't want to burden her with adult conflicts. Some might say that's hiding the truth from her. Some might say it's protecting a 6-year-old from unnecessary anxiety. Ryan looked directly at the judge. When the time comes to explain this situation to Sophie, I will. Honestly and age-appropriately. But I won't traumatize her with details she's too young to process. David nodded. Tell us about the weekend at the cabin. Why did you go? Because I was terrified. Because I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't function knowing that I might lose my daughter. I needed space to breathe before facing this hearing. My lawyer approved it. I maintained contact with Sophie's caregiver. I came back when called. I did nothing wrong. And Ms. Grant? Was someone I met by accident who became a friend when I desperately needed one. Nothing more, nothing less. Thank you. Your witness, Mr. Webb. Marcus Webb approached with the same predatory energy he'd brought to Olivia's testimony. Mr. Carter, you work 2 jobs, correct? Yes, I teach during the day and work security on weekends. That's approximately 60 hours per week, sometimes more. Who cares for Sophie while you're working security shifts? A neighbor, Mrs. Patterson. She's a retired teacher. Excellent, with children. But not family, not professional childcare, just a neighbor. Webb made it sound sordid. How much do you pay Mrs. Patterson? $15 an hour. And your annual income from both jobs? Ryan's chest tightened. Approximately $48,000 before taxes. $48,000. Webb let that number hang in the air. Do you know what the Whitmore's annual household income is? No? Over $600,000. They own their home outright. They have a trust fund established for Sophie's education worth $2.3 million. Can you compete with that, Mr. Carter? I'm not trying to compete. I'm trying to raise my daughter. On $48,000 in one of the most expensive cities in America. How much do you have in savings? David stood. Objection. Wealth isn't a measure of parental fitness. It's a measure of ability to provide, Webb countered. Your Honor, the child's financial security is absolutely relevant. I'll allow it, Judge Morrison said. Mr. Carter, please answer. Ryan forced the words out. Approximately $3,000. $3,000. Webb shook his head as if disappointed. What happens if Sophie needs emergency medical care? If she requires tutoring or therapy beyond what insurance covers? Can you provide that on $3,000 in savings? I would find a way. I always have. Or she could have it immediately, without her father scrambling to make ends meet if she lived with her grandparents. Webb walked back to his table and retrieved a document. I have here a budget prepared by the Whitmores. Private school tuition, music lessons, sports programs, summer camps, college fund contributions. Total annual investment in Sophie's development, $97,000. Can you match that? No. Can you come even remotely close? No, but thank you, Mr. Carter. That's all I needed to hear. Your Honor, I wasn't finished, Ryan said desperately. Judge Morrison looked at him. You may continue, Mr. Carter. Ryan stood, his hands gripping the witness box. I can't match their money. I can't give Sophie private schools or international travel or trust funds, but I can give her something they never gave their own daughter: unconditional acceptance. Amanda told me her parents spent her entire childhood trying to shape her into someone she wasn't, someone worthy of their investment. She said she spent 25 years proving herself to people who never thought she was enough. Margaret Whitmore's face went pale. I won't let that happen to Sophie, Ryan continued, his voice shaking with emotion. She's 6 years old. She likes dinosaurs and mac and cheese and wearing mismatched socks. She's perfect exactly as she is. And if the Whitmores get custody, they'll spend the next 12 years trying to turn her into their version of Amanda, a second chance to create the daughter they wanted. But Sophie isn't Amanda. She's herself. And she deserves to be raised by someone who loves her for who she is, not who she might become with enough money thrown at her. The courtroom was silent. Judge Morrison's expression was unreadable. Anything else, Mr. Carter? Just this. Every decision I've made for 2 years has been about Sophie. Every sacrifice, every compromise, every moment of struggle. I'm not perfect. I work too much. I live in a small apartment. I can't afford expensive things, but I show up every single day, and I will keep showing up for the rest of her life, whether that's as her father or just as someone who loves her. Because that's what parents do. They show up. He sat down, emotionally spent. David gave him a small nod of approval. Webb stood for rebuttal. Your Honor, Mr. Carter's speech was moving, but it doesn't change the facts. He cannot provide what Sophie deserves. Love is important, but it doesn't pay for education, healthcare, opportunities. The Whitmores can give her both love and advantages. That's what we're asking the court to recognize. I've heard enough testimony, Judge Morrison said. I'll review all evidence, including the photographs, and issue a ruling by end of day. This hearing is adjourned. The gavel came down with a sound like a gunshot. Ryan sat frozen as people began filing out. The Whitmores left first, Margaret's hand clutched in Robert's, neither of them looking back. Their legal team followed, briefcases snapping shut with finality. David turned to Ryan. You did well, really well. That final statement was exactly what the judge needed to hear. It wasn't enough, though, was it? Ryan's voice was hollow. Webb destroyed me on the financial arguments. He made his case. We made ours. Now we wait. David gathered his papers. Go home. Try to rest. I'll call as soon as I hear anything. Olivia drove them back to the apartment in silence. Ryan stared out the window, watching Seattle pass by in a blur of gray buildings and gray sky. Everything felt gray now, washed out and uncertain. Inside the apartment, surrounded by Sophie's artwork and toys and life, Ryan finally broke. I'm going to lose her, he said. You heard Webb. The money, the opportunities, the budget projections. How does a judge rule against that? By remembering that children aren't investments, Olivia said firmly. By recognizing that what you said in there was true. Sophie needs you, not a trust fund. You can't know that. Neither can you. So we wait, and we hope, and we trust that Judge Morrison saw what I saw. A father who would give anything for his daughter. Hours crawled by. Ryan tried to eat but couldn't, tried to work but couldn't focus. Olivia sat at the kitchen table, her laptop open but unused, just being present while Ryan fell apart quietly. At 4:30, David's call came. Ryan answered with shaking hands. David? The judge issued her ruling, a pause that felt like eternity. Ryan, you won. You retained primary custody. The world stopped. Ryan couldn't breathe, couldn't process the words. Say that again. You won. Judge Morrison ruled that the Whitmores' financial advantages don't outweigh your established parental relationship and Sophie's obvious well-being under your care. You keep custody. They get supervised visitation twice a month and designated holidays. The trust fund remains in place, but under independent oversight to ensure it's actually used for Sophie's benefit, not as leverage. Ryan's legs gave out. He sat down hard on the floor, phone pressed to his ear, tears streaming down his face. She's safe? He managed. She's yours. You're still her father. That hasn't changed and won't change. After the call ended, Ryan sat on the kitchen floor and cried until he had nothing left. Olivia knelt beside him, not speaking, just holding space for his breakdown. When he could finally speak, Ryan looked at her with streaming eyes. She's coming home. Sophie's coming home. I know, Olivia said softly. I told you truth matters. I told you love wins. You did. You believed when I couldn't. They sat on the floor together until the light faded from the windows and the apartment grew dark around them. Tomorrow, Ryan would pick up Sophie. Tomorrow he'd tell her that everything was going to be okay. Tomorrow he'd start rebuilding the life that had almost been stolen. But tonight, he let himself feel the relief of survival, the overwhelming gratitude for second chances, and the strange, unexpected blessing of having met someone who'd stepped into the battle when she had every reason to walk away. The sun was barely up when Ryan stood outside Mrs. Patterson's door the next morning, his hands trembling as he knocked. He'd barely slept, his mind cycling between disbelief and overwhelming relief. Sophie was his. The court had said so. The battle was over. Mrs. Patterson opened the door with a knowing smile, Sophie's overnight bag already packed in the hallway behind her. I heard, she said simply. Congratulations, Ryan. Thank you for everything, for keeping her safe while I fought. That's what neighbors do. She stepped aside. Sophie's finishing breakfast. She doesn't know yet, does she? No, I wanted to tell her myself. Sophie appeared in the doorway to the kitchen, syrup on her chin, her hair an untamed mess of dark curls. When she saw Ryan, her entire face lit up. Daddy! She launched herself at him, and Ryan caught her, lifting her into his arms and holding her so tightly she squeaked in protest. He buried his face in her hair, breathing in the scent of strawberry shampoo and childhood, and felt something inside him finally settle. I missed you, sweetheart, he managed, his voice thick. I missed you too. Mrs. Patterson let me stay up late, and we watched 2 movies, and I made pancakes this morning all by myself, except she helped with the hot parts. Sophie pulled back to look at his face, her expression suddenly serious. Are you crying? Happy tears, Ryan said, wiping his eyes. Just really happy to see you. Where did you go? Mrs. Patterson said you had important grown-up stuff. I did, but it's all done now, and I have something to tell you. Ryan set her down, kneeling so they were eye level. You know how Grandma and Grandpa Whitmore have been wanting to spend more time with you? Sophie's face clouded. Are they still mad at you? The question hit Ryan like a physical blow. You knew they were mad? Grandma said you weren't taking good enough care of me, that I should live with them in their big house. Sophie's voice became small. But I don't want to live there. I want to live with you. Ryan pulled her close again, fury and heartbreak warring in his chest. The Whitmores had promised not to say anything to Sophie, and they'd broken that promise like they broke everything else. You're not going anywhere, Ryan said firmly. A judge, someone very important who makes decisions about families, she said you're staying exactly where you belong, with me, in our apartment, forever. Sophie's eyes went wide. Really? I don't have to leave. Never. I promise. She threw her arms around his neck, and Ryan held her while she cried quiet tears of relief that broke his heart. She'd been carrying this fear, this uncertainty, and he hadn't fully understood how much it had weighed on her. Can we go home now? Sophie whispered. Yeah, sweetheart, let's go home. They stopped at a diner for celebratory pancakes, Sophie chattering about everything Mrs. Patterson had let her do, the movies they'd watched, the fort they'd built in the living room. Ryan let her talk, soaking in the normalcy of her voice, the way she gestured wildly when she got excited, the syrup she inevitably got on her shirt. Daddy, can we do something special today? Sophie asked between bites. Since you were gone and now you're back? What do you want to do? The Science Museum. They have a new dinosaur exhibit with a real T-Rex skeleton. Ryan thought of the work he'd missed, the lesson plans that needed updating, the mountain of responsibilities waiting. Then he looked at his daughter's hopeful face and made a decision. Absolutely. We'll spend the whole day there. Sophie's whoop of joy made several other diners look over and smile. When they arrived back at the apartment, Olivia was packing her things. Her car was loaded with most of her belongings, just her overnight bag remaining on the couch that had been her bed. Sophie stopped in the doorway, studying this stranger in their space. Hi, Olivia said, offering a gentle smile. You must be Sophie. I'm Olivia. Why are you in our apartment? Sophie, Ryan chided softly. That's not polite. It's a fair question. Olivia knelt to Sophie's level. Your dad and I met while he was away. We became friends. I stayed here last night because we had to go to an important meeting early this morning. Sophie looked between them, her 6-year-old mind clearly trying to piece together what this meant. Are you Daddy's girlfriend? No, sweetheart, Ryan said quickly. Olivia is just a friend who helped me with some important things. Oh. Sophie seemed to accept this. Do you like dinosaurs? I don't know much about them, Olivia admitted, but I'd like to learn. I know everything about dinosaurs. Did you know the velociraptor was actually only 2 feet tall and had feathers? I did not know that. That's fascinating. Ryan watched them interact, something shifting in his chest. Sophie was warming to Olivia with the easy acceptance children had when they sensed genuine interest. And Olivia, despite having no children of her own, spoke to Sophie like she mattered, like her dinosaur facts were important. We're going to the Science Museum today, Sophie announced. Do you want to come? Olivia glanced at Ryan, uncertain. I should probably head back to San Francisco. I've been away from my own life for almost a week. Please? Sophie turned to Ryan. Can she come, Daddy? Please? Ryan should have said no. Should have let Olivia leave, return to her life, close this chapter that had been intense and strange and world-altering. But the word that came out was different. If Olivia wants to, she's welcome. I want to, Olivia said, surprising herself. I'd really like to see this T-Rex skeleton. Sophie grabbed Olivia's hand, tugging her toward the door, already explaining the difference between Tyrannosaurus and Allosaurus. Ryan followed, watching his daughter and this woman who'd walked into his life by accident and feeling something that might have been hope for a different kind of future. The Science Museum was crowded with school groups and families, but Sophie navigated it like a seasoned explorer. She dragged Olivia from exhibit to exhibit, pointing out fossils and geological periods, correcting the information placards when they were outdated. She's incredible, Olivia said as Sophie pressed her face against the glass housing a triceratops skull. So smart and confident. She gets that from her mother, Ryan said quietly. Amanda was brilliant, fearless about pursuing knowledge. She gets the kindness from you, though, and the resilience. Olivia watched Sophie explain something to a younger child who looked confused. You've raised an amazing person, Ryan. I'm just trying not to mess her up too badly. That's called parenting. Olivia smiled. And for what it's worth, you're doing an extraordinary job. They spent 3 hours wandering through prehistoric exhibits and touching interactive displays. Sophie sat in Olivia's lap for the planetarium show, whispering questions about constellations that Olivia answered as best she could. Ryan watched from the seat beside them, his heart doing something complicated and terrifying. On the drive home, Sophie fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from excitement. Olivia followed in her own car, and when they arrived at the apartment, Ryan carried Sophie inside and put her down for a nap. She likes you, Ryan said when he emerged to find Olivia standing by the window, looking out at the city. I like her too. She's special. She is. Ryan moved to stand beside her. Thank you for today. You didn't have to stay. I wanted to. I wanted to see what you were fighting for, and now I understand completely. Olivia turned to face him. She's worth everything, Ryan. Every moment of fear, every sacrifice. You were right to fight. I couldn't have won without you. You would have found another way. You're not someone who gives up. They stood in the afternoon light, the city humming below, Sophie sleeping peacefully down the hall. Everything felt suspended, hovering between what had been and what might come next. What happens now? Ryan asked. You go back to San Francisco, sign the NDA, start rebuilding your career? I don't know. Olivia leaned against the window frame. The NDA is still sitting unsigned on my lawyer's desk. The severance offer is still open, but signing it feels like accepting their version of events, like agreeing that I was complicit in something I had no part of. So don't sign it. Easy to say. Harder to do when that severance package is the difference between financial security and starting over from nothing. You started from nothing before. You built an entire company from a garage. I was 24 and stupid then. Thought I could change the world with good intentions and better encryption. Olivia smiled sadly. Now I'm 30, and I know better. The world doesn't change because you're right. It changes because you have enough money or power to force it. I don't believe that. And I don't think you do either. Ryan moved closer. You walked into a courtroom yesterday and testified for someone you barely knew. Not because you had money or power, but because it was right. That changed something. It changed my world entirely. Olivia looked at him, something vulnerable in her expression. What are you saying? I'm saying don't sign something that makes you lie about who you are. Don't accept their narrative. You told me once that silence always loses, so don't be silent. And do what instead? Write a tell-all book? Give interviews about corporate corruption? Burn every bridge I have left in the tech industry? Or start over? Build something new, something better. Ryan felt bold suddenly, emboldened by survival and the strange intimacy that had grown between them. Stay in Seattle, not in my apartment, he added quickly, seeing her expression. But in the city. Give yourself time to figure out what comes next without the pressure of San Francisco and lawyers and people who betrayed you. Ryan, I know it's crazy. We've known each other less than a week, but crazy is what got us through the custody battle. Crazy is what brought us together in the first place. He took a breath. I'm not asking for anything except time. Time to see if what started at that cabin is real or just trauma bonding. Olivia was quiet for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. I have an apartment lease in San Francisco, a storage unit full of furniture, a life that's waiting for me to come back and pick up the pieces. I know, and you're asking me to abandon all of that for what? A maybe? A possibility that this connection we feel might be something more? No, I'm asking you to consider that maybe picking up old pieces isn't the same as building something new, and maybe you deserve new. Olivia turned away, staring out the window again. My mother did this once, after my father died. She had a chance to go back to her hometown, live with family, have support and stability. Instead, she stayed in a city where she knew no one, started over completely, built a life from nothing because she believed it was right for me. How did that work out? I had an incredible childhood, unconventional and sometimes scary, but filled with love and purpose. Olivia looked back at him. I'm not comparing our situations. We're not your mother and a grieving child. We're two adults who met under bizarre circumstances and helped each other through crisis. That's not a foundation for a relationship. What is it a foundation for? I don't know yet. Maybe friendship. Maybe something that fades once real life returns, and we're not in survival mode anymore. Or maybe it's the beginning of something that matters. Ryan held her gaze. I'm not asking you to commit to anything. I'm asking you to stay long enough to find out which one it is. Sophie's voice called from the bedroom. Daddy, I'm thirsty. Coming, sweetheart, Ryan called back. He looked at Olivia. Think about it. That's all I'm asking. He went to get Sophie water, and when he returned, Olivia was gathering her bag. I need to go, she said. I have calls to make, decisions that can't wait any longer. I understand. At the door, Olivia paused. Thank you for today, for letting me be part of Sophie's world, even briefly. Thank you for everything, for fighting beside me, for believing when I couldn't. She reached up and touched his face, a gesture so tender it made Ryan's breath catch. You're going to be okay, Ryan Carter. You and Sophie both. Then she was gone, the door closing softly behind her, and Ryan was left standing in the sudden quiet of his apartment, wondering if he'd just watched something important walk away. The next week settled into a new rhythm. Sophie returned to school, chattering excitedly about the custody battle being over, telling her friends that a judge had said she could stay with her daddy forever. The Whitmores requested their first supervised visitation, which happened at a neutral location with a court-appointed monitor present. Margaret cried through most of it, holding Sophie too tightly, while Robert stood stiff and formal in the corner. Sophie tolerated it with the patience children showed toward adult emotions they didn't understand, and came home talking about how sad Grandma seemed. Can we make her happy again? Sophie asked Ryan over dinner. Maybe with time, but that's not your job, sweetheart. Grandma and Grandpa are dealing with grown-up sadness that you can't fix. Because they miss Mommy? Yes, very much. Sophie was quiet for a moment, pushing mac and cheese around her plate. Do you still miss Mommy? Every day. But it doesn't hurt as much as it used to, and I can remember the happy things now without it making me too sad. Like what? Like how she used to sing off key in the car and pretend she was on a concert stage, or how she couldn't cook anything without setting off the smoke alarm. Ryan smiled. Or how much she loved you before you were even born. She'd talk to you, tell you stories, play you music. You were the most loved baby in the world. Sophie smiled, something peaceful settling over her features. I wish I could remember her. You do, in ways. You have her laugh, her curiosity, her stubbornness. Ryan reached across the table to squeeze her hand. She's part of you, sweetheart. Always. That night, after Sophie was asleep, Ryan sat at his laptop and opened his email. There, among the usual junk and school notifications, was a message from Olivia. His heart jumped before he'd consciously registered the sender's name. The subject line read, Update from San Francisco. Ryan opened it with trembling fingers. Ryan, it began. I've spent the past 2 weeks thinking about everything that happened. The cabin, the hearing, what you said about building something new. I met with my lawyers and the board. They were pushing hard for me to sign the NDA and accept the severance. It was a lot of money, enough to live comfortably while I figured out my next move. But every time I looked at those documents, I heard your voice saying that silence always loses. So I didn't sign. I walked away from the money, from the easy resolution, from the chance to put everything behind me quietly. Instead, I hired a new attorney who specializes in corporate whistleblower cases. We're building a case against my former CFO and the company that hired him. It will be public and ugly and probably ruin whatever professional reputation I have left. But it's the truth, and I'm tired of letting other people's lies define my story. I wanted you to know that you changed something in me. You reminded me why integrity matters more than comfort. Thank you for that. I hope you and Sophie are well. She's a remarkable child, and you're an extraordinary father. I'm grateful I got to witness that, even briefly. Olivia. Ryan read the email 3 times, feeling pride and sadness in equal measure. She'd chosen the hard path, the honest one, just like she'd testified for him when she could have walked away. He typed a response. Olivia, I'm proud of you for choosing truth. It's the harder road, but you'll never regret it. We're doing well here. Sophie asks about you sometimes. She wants to tell you more dinosaur facts. If you're ever in Seattle, our door is open. Whatever happens with your case, know that you have people here who believe in you. Ryan. He hit send before he could second-guess the words, then sat staring at the screen until it went dark. The weeks turned into months. Summer came, bringing long days and Sophie's 7th birthday. Ryan organized a party at the park, inviting her classmates and a few parent friends he'd finally allowed himself to make. Mrs. Patterson came bearing a homemade cake shaped like a stegosaurus. Even the Whitmores attended, sitting apart from the other adults, but watching Sophie blow out candles with expressions of bittersweet longing. Margaret approached Ryan as the party was winding down, her hands twisted together nervously. Thank you for inviting us, she said quietly. You're her grandparents. Of course you're invited. We haven't always acted like it, have we? Margaret's eyes filled with tears. We were so angry about losing Amanda, so desperate to hold on to something, and we almost destroyed the best part of her legacy in the process. Ryan didn't know what to say. The rage he'd carried for months had faded into something more complicated, understanding mixed with wariness. I loved Amanda, Margaret continued, but you're right about what you said in court. We spent her whole life trying to shape her into someone we thought she should be. We never just let her be herself. And when we lost her, we couldn't bear the thought that you might make the same mistakes we did. So you tried to take Sophie away to make different mistakes? Yes, foolish and cruel mistakes born from grief we didn't know how to handle. Margaret watched Sophie across the park, laughing as she chased another child. She's happy, Ryan. Genuinely happy. We can see that now. We were wrong to fight you. I appreciate you saying that. Robert and I would like to maintain the visitation schedule, if you'll allow it. Not because the court mandates it, but because we want to be part of Sophie's life. The way grandparents should be, supportive, loving, without trying to control or replace you. Ryan studied her face, seeing genuine remorse there. I never wanted to keep you away, Margaret. I just wanted Sophie to stay with me. We understand that now. Too late to avoid all the pain we caused, but better late than never. She pulled an envelope from her purse. This is a letter from our attorneys officially withdrawing any future custody claims. We wanted you to have it in writing. Sophie is yours. We accept that completely. Ryan took the envelope, feeling a weight he hadn't known he was still carrying finally lift. Thank you, he managed. Thank you for not hating us, for letting us try again. After the party, Sophie fell asleep in the car, sticky with frosting and sunshine. Ryan carried her inside and tucked her into bed, pulling the covers up to her chin and smoothing her wild hair. Best birthday ever, she mumbled, half asleep. I'm glad, sweetheart. Daddy? I wish Olivia could have been here. She would have liked the dinosaur cake. Ryan's heart constricted. Sophie had mentioned Olivia a dozen times over the past months, always casual observations that cut deeper than she knew. Maybe next time, Ryan said softly. Do you think she'll come back? I don't know, baby. She has her own life in California. But she could visit, right? Friends visit. They do. We'll see. He kissed her forehead and left her to sleep, walking to the living room and pulling out his phone. He opened his email and found the thread with Olivia. Their correspondence had continued sporadically. Updates about her legal case, stories about Sophie's school year, the careful maintenance of a connection neither wanted to sever completely. Ryan typed without overthinking. Sophie's birthday party was today. She asked about you, said you would have liked the dinosaur cake. She's right, you would have. How are you? The response came hours later, well after midnight California time. I would have loved that cake. Tell Sophie happy birthday from me. I'm okay. The legal battle is exhausting but necessary. Some days I regret not taking the easy money. Most days I don't. How are you really? Ryan smiled at the screen, at the question that asked for more than surface pleasantries. Really? I'm good. Better than I've been in years. Sophie is thriving. Work is steady. The Whitmores and I are building something that might eventually become peace. But there's this strange emptiness sometimes, like something's missing that I didn't know I needed until I had it briefly. The response was immediate this time. I know that feeling. Ryan's heart hammered as he typed, When does your case wrap up? My lawyer says another 2 months, maybe 3. Why? Because I think you should come to Seattle when it's done. Not for me, he added quickly. For you. You've been fighting someone else's battle for months. When it's over, you should do something just for yourself. Visit the city. See Sophie. Figure out what comes next from somewhere that isn't San Francisco. The pause stretched so long Ryan thought she wouldn't respond. Then, I'll think about it. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. And Ryan found himself smiling as he set down his phone and prepared for bed. 3 months later, on a crisp October morning, 1 year after their first meeting, Ryan's phone rang with an unknown Seattle number. Hello? Hi. Olivia's voice, nervous and uncertain. I'm at a hotel downtown. My case settled last week. The CFO is facing criminal charges, and my former company issued a public apology and financial compensation for wrongful termination. It's over. Ryan's heart stopped. You're here? In Seattle? I told you I'd think about it. I thought about it a lot, and then I packed a bag and drove north because I needed to see if what we had was real, or just a moment in time that we've been romanticizing. Where are you? I'll come to you. Actually, I was hoping to see Sophie, if that's okay. I know it's a school day, but maybe after? I have something for her. A late birthday present. Ryan laughed, giddy and terrified in equal measure. She gets out at 3. We could meet you at the park near her school. I'll be there. The hours until 3 o'clock crawled by with excruciating slowness. Ryan couldn't focus on teaching, couldn't think about anything except Olivia in the city, Olivia wanting to see them, Olivia testing whether what they'd built could survive outside of crisis. He picked Sophie up and drove to the park without explaining where they were going. She chatted about her day, something about a science project on erosion, and Ryan made appropriate noises without processing the words. Then he saw her. Olivia, standing by the swings in jeans and a sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders, looking simultaneously confident and vulnerable. Sophie saw her at the same moment and gasped. Olivia! She was out of the car before Ryan had fully stopped, running across the grass and launching herself at Olivia with the fearless affection of children who remembered kindness. Olivia caught her, laughing and stumbling back, her arms wrapping around Sophie with genuine warmth. "Look how much you've grown," Olivia said, setting Sophie down. "You must be at least a foot taller." "I'm not that much taller, but I did grow 2 inches since last year." Sophie grabbed Olivia's hand. "Did you come to visit? Are you staying? Daddy said you might come back someday, and I told all my friends about you, and they want to meet you, and I have so many new dinosaur facts to tell you." "Sophie, breathe," Ryan said, approaching more slowly. He met Olivia's eyes over his daughter's head. "Hi." "Hi," she said softly. They stood there, 3 people connected by chance and choice, while the autumn wind scattered leaves around them and the city hummed with life. "I brought you something," Olivia told Sophie, producing a wrapped package from her bag. "For your birthday. I know I'm very late." Sophie tore into it with enthusiasm, revealing a beautifully illustrated book about paleontology written by a renowned scientist. "It's perfect," Sophie hugged the book to her chest. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." "You're very welcome, CL." Olivia looked at Ryan. "Can we talk? Maybe while Sophie plays?" "Yeah, of course." They settled on a bench while Sophie climbed the playground equipment, her new book temporarily forgotten on the seat beside them. "Your case settled," Ryan said. "How do you feel?" "Vindicated, exhausted, relieved, angry that it took so long, grateful it's over." Olivia watched Sophie hang upside down from the monkey bars. "Mostly I feel free, like I can finally decide what comes next without the weight of someone else's lies hanging over me." "So what does come next?" "I don't know yet. I've been fielding job offers from companies who see my whistleblower case as evidence of integrity rather than disloyalty. Some interesting opportunities in New York, Austin, here in Seattle." She paused. "I'm not sure if I want to go back to corporate leadership. I might do consulting or teaching or something completely different." "You have options, that's good." "I do, but options are paralyzing when you don't know what you actually want." Olivia turned to face him. "What do you want, Ryan?" The directness of the question caught him off guard. He could deflect, make a joke, keep things light and safe. Or he could be honest. "I want you to stay in Seattle, not because I need you, Sophie and I are okay on our own, but because when I imagine the future, you're in it. Not as some distant friend who emails occasionally, but as someone present. Someone who's part of our lives in real, tangible ways." That's a lot to ask from someone you've spent maybe 2 weeks total with over the past year. "I know, and if that's all this is, a beautiful moment that doesn't translate to real life, I can accept that. But I think it's more. I think we built something real at that cabin, and in the courtroom, and in every email we've sent since. I think you feel it too." Olivia was quiet, her eyes on Sophie. "I do feel it. It terrifies me." "Me too. I don't know how to do this, Ryan. I've never had a serious relationship. I spent my entire adult life building a company. I don't know how to build a life with someone." "Neither do I. Amanda and I were figuring it out together when she died. I'm not an expert." Ryan reached for her hand hesitantly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. She didn't. "But maybe we figure it out together. Take it slow. See where it goes without pressure or expectations." "What about Sophie? She's already attached to me. What if this doesn't work and we hurt her?" "Sophie is resilient, and she deserves to see that relationships can be built on honesty and mutual respect, not just fairy tale romance. Whatever happens between us, we handle it like adults. We communicate. We put her first." "You make it sound simple." "It won't be. But the best things rarely are." Olivia squeezed his hand, a small smile playing at her lips. "I have an apartment lease starting next month, downtown Seattle, close to the waterfront. I told myself it was just to have options, to explore the city while I considered job offers. But really, I think I knew I was coming back to you, to this." Ryan felt something bright and warm unfurl in his chest. "Yeah? Yeah. I'm terrified, and it's probably crazy, and we barely know each other outside of crisis situations. But I want to try. I want to see if what we have can become something real." "Daddy! Olivia, watch this!" Sophie called from the top of the slide. They watched her slide down, her laughter carrying across the playground. And when she ran back to climb the ladder again, Ryan pulled Olivia closer. "This is real," he said quietly. "Right here, right now. Everything else we'll figure out as we go." Olivia leaned her head against his shoulder, and it felt like coming home. The months that followed were an education in building something new. Olivia moved into her downtown apartment and started consulting work that gave her flexibility and autonomy. Ryan and Sophie settled into a routine that slowly began including Olivia, Sunday brunches, midweek dinners, movie nights on the couch. Also, Sophie adored having another adult who engaged with her interests, who listened to her dinosaur facts with genuine fascination, who showed up to school events and birthday parties. The Whitmores maintained their visitation schedule, and slowly, painfully, something like forgiveness began to grow. They would never be close, but they learned to coexist for Sophie's sake. Margaret even apologized to Olivia during one awkward encounter, acknowledging the role she'd played in trying to destroy someone who'd only been helping. "I was wrong about you," Margaret said simply. "You're good for Ryan. Good for Sophie. I'm glad you didn't let our attacks drive you away." "I'm stubborn," Olivia replied, "and I learned from someone important that silence always loses. So I stayed and fought." By the time the anniversary of the custody hearing rolled around, Ryan and Olivia had been officially dating for 6 months. It was slow and careful, and sometimes awkward as they learned each other's rhythms and boundaries. But it was also real in ways that surprised them both. "I want to do something," Olivia said one evening while Sophie did homework at the kitchen table. "To mark the anniversary. Not of the hearing, that's too heavy, but of when we met. Of the cabin." Ryan looked up from the papers he was grading. "What did you have in mind?" "We should go back, the three of us. Rent that cabin again and spend a weekend there. Let Sophie see where it all started." Sophie's head popped up. "Can we? Really?" "If your dad agrees." Ryan thought about it, returning to the place where everything had changed, but this time as a family, rather than two desperate strangers. The symmetry of it felt right. "Yeah," he said. "Let's do it." They rented the same cabin, though this time with deliberate coordination rather than booking error. The drive up was filled with Sophie's excitement and Olivia's nostalgia. When they arrived, the cabin looked exactly as Ryan remembered. Weathered cedar, mountain views, the promise of sanctuary. "This is where you met?" Sophie asked, running through the rooms with delight. "This is where we met," Olivia confirmed. "Your dad arrived late at night and I thought he was an intruder. Were you scared?" "A little, but mostly confused." Olivia caught Ryan's eye, smiling. "Then we figured out the property manager had made a mistake, and we were stuck together." "Best mistake ever," Sophie declared, claiming the bedroom with the mountain view as hers. That night, after Sophie was asleep, Ryan and Olivia sat on the deck under a sky full of stars. The mountains rose around them, dark and eternal, and the silence was complete except for wind in the pines. "A year ago, I was sitting on this deck having a panic attack about losing Sophie," Ryan said quietly, "wondering how I'd survive if the Whitmores won, and then you walked outside and somehow made it bearable." "A year ago, I was running from my entire life," Olivia replied, "convinced I'd failed at everything that mattered, and then you showed me what real courage looked like, what fighting for something actually meant. We saved each other." "We did, and then we built something neither of us expected." Ryan turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "I love you, Olivia. I probably have since that first night when you told me truth matters more than winning. I love your strength and your intelligence and the way you read bedtime stories to Sophie with different voices for all the characters. I love that you chose the hard path over the easy money. I love you, and I want to build a life with you. Not someday. Now." Olivia's eyes shimmered with tears. "I love you too. I love your devotion to Sophie and your stupid optimism that good people can win against systems designed to crush them. I love that you make me want to be braver, better, more honest. I love this life we're building together." Ryan kissed her under the stars, on the deck where they'd first admitted their fears, and it felt like every hard decision and painful moment had led exactly here. Inside, Sophie slept peacefully, safe and loved, and exactly where she belonged. 6 months later, Ryan and Olivia stood before a small gathering of friends and family in a simple ceremony at a downtown Seattle venue. Sophie served as flower girl and ring bearer, taking her duties with utmost seriousness. The Whitmores attended, sitting in the back with expressions of bittersweet acceptance. Mrs. Patterson cried through the entire ceremony. David Chen gave a toast about fighting for what matters and finding love in unexpected places. A year and a half ago, Ryan said in his vows, I was drowning in fear and grief. Then a property manager made a mistake that changed everything. Olivia, you walked into my life when I needed someone most, and you stayed when you had every reason to leave. You fought beside me when my whole world was falling apart. You showed my daughter what strength and integrity look like. You made me believe in second chances and new beginnings. I promise to spend the rest of my life being worthy of that gift. I promise to fight beside you the way you fought for us. I promise to build a life with you that's honest and brave and full of love. Olivia's vows were equally simple and devastating. Ryan, you reminded me why truth matters more than comfort. You showed me that the best things in life come from taking risks for the right reasons. You gave me a family I never knew I needed. Sophie, you showed me that love doesn't require biology, just commitment and care. I promise to be the kind of parent Amanda would be proud of. I promise to always encourage your dinosaur obsession and fact-check your research. And Ryan, I promise to choose us every day for the rest of our lives. They exchanged rings, simple gold bands that Sophie had helped pick out, and kissed while their small gathering applauded and cheered. The reception was casual, held at a restaurant with a private room and good wine. Sophie ran between tables, her flower crown slightly askew, telling everyone who would listen about how her daddy had met Olivia at a cabin in the mountains and now they were a family forever. She's not wrong, Olivia said, watching Sophie charm the guests. No, she's not. Ryan pulled his wife closer, still marveling at that word. Wife. Family. Future. We really did this. We really did. Against all odds and conventional wisdom, we built something real. Any regrets? Not even one. They danced to a song Sophie had picked, something upbeat and silly that made everyone laugh, and later when the celebration wound down and Sophie fell asleep in Ryan's arms, exhausted from joy, they drove home to the apartment that would soon become too small for their growing family. We need a bigger place, Olivia said as Ryan carried Sophie to bed. Yeah, something with a yard maybe. Sophie's been asking about getting a dog. A dog. A bigger house. A whole life we're building together. Olivia smiled. A year ago, I would have said this was impossible. Too fast, too complicated, too risky. What do you say now? Now I say impossible things happen all the time. You just have to be brave enough to believe in them. They stood together in the doorway of Sophie's room, watching her sleep, and Ryan felt the last pieces of his broken heart finally heal. The grief of losing Amanda would always be there, a gentle ache that reminded him of what they'd shared, but it no longer defined him. He'd learned to carry it alongside joy, alongside hope, alongside this new love that had emerged from chaos and chance. Thank you, he whispered to Olivia. For what? For seeing me, for staying, for choosing this life. Thank you for showing me what choosing looks like, what courage really means. They closed Sophie's door and walked to their own room hand in hand, ready to face whatever came next together. Outside, the city lights twinkled like stars, and somewhere in the mountains north of Seattle, a cabin sat empty, waiting for the next lost souls who needed sanctuary. The property manager would eventually fix the booking system, eliminating the error that had brought two strangers together. But the story those strangers created would endure, a testament to the power of showing up, fighting for what matters, and believing that love can emerge from the most unexpected places. Ryan Carter had walked into that cabin expecting silence and found salvation. Olivia Grant had fled to the mountains seeking escape and found purpose. Sophie got to keep her father and gain a mother who chose her every single day. And together, the three of them built a family not from perfect circumstances or fairy tale romance, but from honesty, courage, and the simple decision to stand beside the people who matter most. The photographs the Whitmore's investigators had taken, meant to destroy Ryan, were eventually filed away and forgotten. But the memories created in that cabin, and in every moment since, became the foundation of something that would last forever. Years later, when Sophie was older and asked about how her parents really met, they told her the whole truth. The custody battle, the desperate retreat to the mountains, the booking error that became destiny, the courtroom fight that almost tore everything apart. So you met because Grandma and Grandpa tried to take me away? Sophie asked, processing this revelation with the wisdom of adolescence. We met because we were both running from hard things, Ryan explained, and we stayed because we found something worth running toward instead. Each other, Sophie said, understanding dawning. Each other, Olivia confirmed. And you. Always you. It wasn't a traditional love story. It didn't follow the expected patterns or timelines, but it was real and honest and built on the kind of foundation that weathers any storm. And in the end, that was all that mattered. The family Ryan had fought so desperately to preserve had grown beyond what he'd imagined possible. The woman who testified beside him became his partner in everything. The daughter who'd been at the center of the battle grew up secure and loved and surrounded by people who chose her every day. The mountain stood witness to all of it, eternal and unchanging, holding the secrets of two strangers who became family because they were brave enough to fight for truth and strong enough to build something new from the ashes of what they'd lost. And somewhere in the records of a small property management company, a notation remained about a booking error on an October weekend years ago. A mistake that changed 3 lives forever. A glitch in the system that proved sometimes the best things in life come from the moments when everything goes perfectly, impossibly wrong.